Warm greetings from the high 10. It's Everyday Shenanigans. Decided to sit outside to do this live. This live is pertaining to Sherra Wright, the ex-wife of Lorenzen Wright. She was denied parole last week. I'm also going to bring you information about Breonna Taylor. There's commentary coming out of Louisville, Kentucky pertaining to monies that are missing, that went missing from her apartment the night that she was shot. And also, I'm going to bring you information out of Texas, Clean Texas, pertaining to Vanessa Guillén. There's a new document that has been brought forward in relation to the motive behind her death. Another comrade murdered her, African-American male, and I'm going to bring you that said information. It's very lengthy, so I possibly will do that one last since it has the most information to bring forward. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Everyday Shenanigans. Sherra Wright denied parole on Lorenzen Wright's murder. WREG News Channel 3 is the source. Thank you for joining me.
Victims 5 more years behind bars. In a 3-0 vote, the Tennessee Parole Board denied her request to get out of jail. No one happier than Deborah Marion, the mother of basketball standout Lorenzen Wright, whose murder Sherra helped orchestrate.
Thank you, Jesus. That's the only thing I can say. Thank you, Lord, because he feel my pain. I'm glad she don't need parole. I can't have parole. If I could see my son again, I'd be glad for her to have parole.
During her parole hearing, Sherra pled for mercy.
It's a privilege, and it is not something that I have to receive or something that I should receive. And I'm asking today for your mercy.
But some said she still wasn't taking responsibility for her role in the killing of Lorenzen Wright in 2010. Sherra's cousin, Jimmy Martin, and her church member, Billy Ray Turner, were said to be handpicked by Sherra to carry out the crime. Jimmy Martin got immunity for his testimony, and Turner got a life sentence.
She's not regretful. She keep putting it on him.
Sherra came up for parole early because of good behavior, time already served, and prison overcrowding. DA Amy Wyrick, who spoke out against her early release, hopes new mandatory time will help avoid situations like this.
A sentence needs to mean something in the state of Tennessee, and we will be able to do that in a better way once this truth in sentencing goes into effect July 1. But this back and forth with families and victims to the parole board over and over and over again, it's not fair.
The parole board said Sherra's release from custody at this time would depreciate the seriousness of the crime of which she stands convicted or promote disrespect of the law. Sherra is up for parole again in May 2027. Deborah Marion plans to be there fighting it again.
Yes, I'm going to be there every time they call her name. That was my firstborn.
April Thompson, WREG News Channel 3.
Now, the parole board sent a letter to Sherra Wright outlining its decision, telling her to maintain positive jail behavior to improve her chances of parole next time.
All right, everybody. That's information coming out of Memphis pertaining to this crazy person. I don't believe she deserves parole either. That's my personal opinion. Pertaining to the hearing. Obviously, the board felt like it would be disrespectful to let her out. It naturally would be disrespectful because the woman plotted to kill her ex-husband, assumingly for insurance money and possibly still having what I would call hatred for the man. Because anytime you plot a person's death, you have hatred for them. There's no way you could ever say, well, yeah, I liked him or her a little bit. I cared for him or her a little bit. I loved him or her a little bit. No, you didn't have any feelings for him. I don't know if it was because they couldn't make it work a second time. Because as most of you know, he was living in Atlanta, Georgia. And he came back to Memphis for whatever reason. Because naturally he has had children with her. So he possibly was coming back to visit his family, his children. And something went terribly wrong on that last visit back to Memphis, Tennessee. And maybe in his mind, he thought it could work with her. Maybe he realized, hey, I made a mistake. I've been out here doing this and that. I need to try to make my family work, make it work with this woman. But obviously it did not work. And something went terribly wrong that fateful trip back to Memphis, because she got with her cousin and another man, church member, to plot the death of her ex-husband. And she got over $1 million in insurance money. And naturally, that's not enough money to last when you're accustomed to a certain way of living. And then she has a lot of children. So when you count in what it costs to live at that time, raising a lot of children, trying to compete with the Joneses, the money would go very fast. Very, very fast. She's hideous to me. Sure is what is wrong with the world. People are very greedy, very honorary, and she felt self-entitled. As you heard her talking to the parole board, saying something about, yes, she's privileged. How are you privileged, ma'am? Talk to the queen. Let the queen know what you mean, because I don't understand what the hell you're talking about. You're privileged. How the hell are you privileged and you're locked up in prison? You mean you had a privileged life at one time with Mr. Lorenzen Wright. He was an athlete, made a lot of money. He took care of you and his children and afforded you all a very comfortable and nice or lavish lifestyle. And then that came to an abrupt end at some point because there are allegations that he was out philandering with women, this and that. You all had marital issues. Then you two divorced. And then allegedly you all were trying to make it work again, but it didn't. Next thing we know, he's missing. And then some time later, they come up with suspects that are linked to you, you only, and then you are implicated as the facilitator of the death of Lorenzen Wright. So what the hell are you talking about? You're privileged. You know what you're privileged, Sherra? You're privileged to be breathing. How about that? Because the same thing that you exacted upon Lorenzen, being a facilitator to his murder, somebody could have done you the same damn way. When you're walking around free, living off that dead man's money, which I don't know why your name would still be on a document as a beneficiary of an insurance policy, because he should have changed it after he divorced you. Frankly, I would have changed it as soon as I started having problems with you, or vice versa. When I realized the relationship wasn't working out, hell, let me take her name off this beneficiary. Because one would have to wonder, what were you saying to him when you two were still living together and having marital problems? Were you making nasty and rude and disrespectful comments to the man? Hey, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to get somebody to kill you. I wish you were dead. We don't know because the dead is not here. And you're surely not going to tell us what you said to him during the failing marriage. But you deserve every damn day in that prison, because you had no right to take that man's life. And you may not have been the one to pull the trigger, which his mother believes you did. But you orchestrated it. And to me, you deserve every damn day they give you in their state. You deserve every day. And you don't deserve to walk free. Even 20 years is not enough for what you did, because you, as his mother said, you stole a whole life. And you two weren't even together. So it didn't even make any sense to be plotting the death of a man you weren't even married to. It's wrong even if you were married to him. But he was not your husband. He was your ex-husband. And you were afforded the opportunity to get a life insurance policy off a dead man that you orchestrated and killed. So is that what you mean by privileged? But as I said, you're privileged to be alive, because the same thing could have happened to you those years you walked free and living off a dead man's money. That's my sad commentary pertaining to Sherra Wright. My next story is pertaining to Miss Breonna Taylor. Lord have mercy. It's always something. Thank y'all for joining me. If you'd like to donate to the channel, $ Big Angie 129 Cash App, all super chats. Stickers are welcome during this live. And happy Memorial Day to all of you out there. What's left of it's nighttime now, but thank you all so much. See if I can pull it up. It's a lot of information I've got to bring. Whew. Vice News journalist uncovers new information on officers who killed Breonna Taylor. MSNBC is the source.
officers with a no-knock warrant broke down her front door after midnight. The 26-year-old emergency room technician, who was not even the target of the raid, was shot 5 times. To this day, none of the officers have been held accountable for killing an innocent, unarmed woman in her own home, where she was supposed to be safe. The only charges ever brought were against one officer accused of endangering a neighboring white couple when shots were fired went into their apartment. And even then, the officer was cleared. And no charges were ever filed regarding Breonna's black neighbors, who also had bullet holes in their walls. In a 2-part special investigation that airs tonight and tomorrow, Vice News has uncovered new information about a host of illegal activities allegedly perpetrated by Louisville police officers, including sexual assault and pocketing cash from police seizures, including taking money from Breonna Taylor's home after they killed her.
When you say crooked people, what do you mean?
Like keeping drugs, keeping money, and stuff that they seized off of the defendants. They would tell me when they go and do these busts that, like, let's just say 4 of them going to do it, everybody gets money split equally. The most that I've ever seen them get was $500,000. They split most of the money amongst themselves.
So they only reported some of the $500,000?
I don't know if any of them got reported.
Vice News correspondent Roberto Ferdman joins me now. Thank you for being here, Roberto. How widespread was this? Sounds like a theft ring.
I mean, based on our reporting, I would say that it's fairly widespread within the narcotics unit. We've spoken to about 24 people whose homes have been raided and who say that more money was taken than police reported. We've identified several different instances, and through this reporting, it's our understanding that this isn't a matter of like 1 or 2 bad apples, people who are doing this, former narcotics officers, current narcotics officers at the department. It was more of something like a dozen narcotics officers who either were doing this or must have known about this because people that they were working with were executing warrants, seizing money, and then reporting less in many of these cases than people said was taken from their homes.
Yeah. And were any of the officers that were involved in killing Breonna Taylor doing this?
What we know is that the informant that you saw in this clip, who was describing what happened in a separate raid, the day after Breonna Taylor's raid, says that they were told by a member of Hankison, Brett Hankison's former unit, who was famously part of this raid, that $15,000 was found in the apartment that night. They said that they don't know what happened to it, but we spoke to Kenneth Walker, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, who was at the apartment that night, and he said that he was aware of $1,000 that was at the apartment that went missing after the raid. And then on top of that, the day afterward, in a jail phone call, Breonna Taylor's ex, Jamarcus Glover, who was at the center of this investigation that led to these raids, said that he had given Breonna about $14,000. He says $8,000 plus another $6,000. And I think it's important to point out that there were 3 separate investigations into what happened that night, 2 by LMPD and 1 by the Attorney General's office. And despite investigators at LMPD pointing out this jail call recording where the money is mentioned, there never seems to have been an attempt to figure out if there was money there, and if so, who took it.
And Daniel Cameron, who ostensibly was the leader of that investigation, was supposed to get to the truth. He's now running for governor. That's interesting. Let's talk about these other allegations that include sexual misconduct, or essentially, is this extorting sex out of defendants?
I mean, the pattern that we've found and that we've seen through, we've called through hundreds of internal documents, most of them which the public hasn't previously seen, interviews of officers, we've spoken to victims, is using the power that a police officer has to hold charges over someone's head. For instance, after they've arrested a woman, to solicit sex from them, whether that's, any sort of sexual activity. And these women, some of whom we've spoken to, have expressed, how effective a police officer can be in wielding that power, because they have immense control over whether a charge is brought, whether a citation is handed in, and even what happens in the courtroom afterward.
Is there any evidence that the department, Internal Affairs, or Daniel Cameron, who's again running for governor, has tried to investigate any of this?
The police department has fielded many complaints against police officers, and I don't think it's fair to say that they haven't tried to investigate, but what our reporting, we believe, has shown is that the efforts to investigate these complaints, especially when the initial complaints come in, have really fallen short. They have not brought officers in for interviews. They have waited to request certain evidence, like officers' phones, and in doing so, they've allowed some of these bad actors to continue acting unchecked and in some cases victimize more women.
Did you find evidence in your reporting that other officers who might know that these would really come down to sort of a crime ring or theft ring inside of the department and have tried to speak up, have felt intimidated or been afraid to come forward?
Oh, I mean, I can say with great certainty that there is a lot of pressure internally to not speak to the press. And I say this because many of our sources are current and former LMPD officers. I know that this afternoon, after press started coming out, an email was sent to the entire department by the public information officer reminding everyone that it is against policy to speak to the media and that all requests should go through them. Absolutely, there's a lot of pressure to not speak to people outside. There are people that really want to internally, but I think that part of this is a system problem. Yeah, a big part of this is a system problem.
And let me ask you this, because we know that police departments around the country have chosen to settle and spend taxpayer money to pay when they kill people, unarmed people. This happens a lot. Have there been attempts in these cases to settle with people who've had their money stolen, to cover it up that way?
Well, in the local system there, plea deals are very common, and this is true around the country. So, and this is true in all sorts of cases. It's true in sexual assault cases involving police officers. It's true when someone's home is raided. And the plea deals end up, I think, allowing for pretty lenient sentencing of officers and for things not to be found out by the public.
MSNBC is the source. So let's chop up what was said in this commentary. Who is this informant that decided to speak to the news about $500,000 being taken out of someone's person's home, car? Who is this informant? Is this a current Louisville police officer and or former police officer? Because how would he have this information to know that officers of the Louisville Police Department out of Kentucky stole money, drugs, whatever valuable from people's homes they were raiding? $500,000 is a lot of money to split among a few men, women. And the fact that somebody walked up on the scene as an officer and saw monies, drugs, whatsoever, and then realized it never got accounted for once it got to the booking room, that says a lot. Now, this person will be labeled a snitch amongst his comrades, but he told the truth, I'm assuming. Why lie about officers stealing money, drugs? And I'm going to bring you more commentary pertaining to this dirty cop that's also been linked to sexual assault in Louisville, Kentucky. He's been a dirty, dirty guy. We're also going to discuss the fact that when they shot in this woman's apartment, black neighbors' apartments got shot up. No restitution, no nothing to them. But some white people's apartments got shot up, and I believe they got repairs done. Why is that? Let's say she was keeping dope in her house at one time. Hello, TZ. Thank you for joining me. There was no dope allegedly found in the apartment unless there was dope there and you all took it. Now, let's also think about the guy who's incarcerated who would have left the dope in her possession. Most men possibly wouldn't want to leave drugs to a woman that, one, they're not dating anymore, and two, she had a current boyfriend at the time, Mr. Kenneth Walker. Because I think a guy would be concerned that this guy may find the dope and the money, spend the money, dope, hurt her, whatsoever. So perhaps her house was just a drop for the money, a place to keep the money. Well, how about this? Kenneth says $1,000 is missing from the apartment. And a jailhouse recording of the ex-boyfriend states that $14,000 is missing that he gave Breonna before her death. So where is that money? Who is the informant that gave this information of money's missing out of her apartment? Dirty cops stealing drugs and money off of persons during raids. Mr. Walker, the current boyfriend at the time of her death, says $1,000 was missing, never mentioned, accounted for. And then the jailhouse recording says the ex-boyfriend gave her $14,000. Two separate incidents of giving her money, $8,000 one time, $6,000 another, and nobody has said anything about finding any money. And if they found the money, let's just say the cops decided to report that money. The first thing they would have said is what they assumed about Breonna in the first place. Well, it's dope money. That's why we were there. But could it be that you were there because you knew or assumed she was holding dope in the house and money for the ex-boyfriend, and you went there intentionally to steal anything of value at her house, her apartment? You had no intention of bringing any dope or money out of there to record for the record. Because allegedly you all have been watching her apartment. You said that she received packages there of some sort. He was coming and going. The ex. Sometimes I wonder if that's even true because, as I said, what guy is going to leave his dope and money in the apartment house of a girlfriend who has a new boyfriend? At some point, he would find out that somebody else was staying there. Why would he risk his goods being confiscated by a boyfriend or anybody else that traffics out of her apartment? And maybe at one time, the ex-boyfriend had packages sent to her house, such as clothing, because there was an incident of mail coming there, I think UPS or FedEx, and it was actually just a sweatshirt. Wasn't any drugs or money or any type of drug paraphernalia. But the point is, we now have testimony to crooked cops stealing money off of people during raids in Louisville, Kentucky. Kenneth Walker saying $1,000 was missing. Haven't heard anything about that money. And a jailhouse recording now has come to light about $14,000 given to Breonna Taylor before death. Nobody has said anything about it. The police department has not mentioned that they confiscated any monies out of that apartment on the night of her murder. And you all are grimy as hell. I'm going to bring you commentary pertaining to this Hankison everybody's talking about. He's been a busy bee. Besides you being a happy slap cop, shooting in an apartment, stealing goods from persons, you also like touching women inappropriately. Very sick. This was uploaded 11 days ago by WLKY News Louisville. We're going to talk about Breonna Taylor, her unfortunate murder on that fateful night in the Louisville Police Department. Do they have dirty cops working? And were dirty cops working the night that she was murdered? Did they steal money out of her apartment? Are they also sexually assaulting random women off the street during seizures, stops, traffic stops? I'm going to bring you all that information. We're going to take a dive into the Louisville Police Department. WLKY is my next source. Thank you for joining me.
The department handled them.
And now it appears that misconduct may be a part of the ongoing federal probe into the department.
WLKY's Mark Vanderhoff gives us a look at the Vice News report and what it means for the city's attempts at reform.
WLKY News has reported on these cases over the years as they've come to light. But when you look at them all together, Vice News says that there is a pattern in the way LMPD handles the cases, and that could spell trouble for Louisville.
Everything's taken away when you're raped. It's taken away when you report, and they took it away in court.
That's Louisville resident Heather Richards in the Vice News episode examining allegations of sexual misconduct by 3 LMPD officers, Brian Bailey, Pablo Cano, and Brett Hankison. Attorney Shannon Favre is representing Richards and 4 other women in a lawsuit against Cano and Metro Louisville.
When I found out about it, I started talking to some officers I know, and none of them were surprised. They knew who he was. They knew that he was not a good guy, that he should never have made it through training.
While all 3 officers have been sued in civil court, only Cano ever faced criminal charges. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison after pleading guilty to 5 misdemeanor counts of sexual misconduct. According to Vice News, LMPD's Public Integrity Unit was slow to investigate and sometimes appeared to be trying to discredit victims.
Well, I do think it's a fair representation, and coming from the legislative branch now, where I currently am, we've taken certain steps to be a check and a balance.
Mark Fox, chair of the Metro Council's Public Safety Committee, notes the city ordered a review of LMPD and is monitoring progress on the ensuing reforms.
The problem they have now is that they're so short-staffed that getting to an investigation quickly is going to be problematic. I've seen marked improvements at the police department. The tragedy of this is the damage is already done.
There is also an ongoing U.S. Department of Justice investigation into LMPD, announced after the civil unrest of 2020 and the death of Breonna Taylor. Favre says the DOJ contacted her about the Cano case as part of its investigation.
If your rights were violated, be it by rape or just being arrested because you're black, any of that stuff is a violation of your civil rights, because everyone is supposed to be protected under the Civil Rights Code.
There's no indication on when the DOJ will finish its investigation or when the findings will be made public. Mark Vanderoff, WLKY News.
We reached out to LMPD for an interview or statement, but have not received a response. If you missed last night's episode, you can watch on Vice TV's YouTube channel. Tonight's investigation looks at allegations that narcotics officers stole cash and...
So there we have it. WLKY News Louisville is the source. If you want to subscribe to this YouTube channel called Vice, please do so, because they have informative information on their network. And that's how I came to get this information pertaining to Breonna Taylor and these crooked cops out of Louisville, Kentucky. As I said, are we now talking about an epidemic with some of these dirty cops? Let me make sure I use the appropriate terminology. Some of those fellas, maybe even some females, dirty too. And God forbid, it goes up the rank to sergeant, lieutenant, captain. I don't know. How far are we talking as far as corruption, theft? So what are we saying? We just got some Louisville police officers just running around the streets, surveillance of the dope houses, drug trafficking, setting up the mark for raids to steal any valuables they have in their house and then don't report anything. How's that going to work if you say you're investigating somebody? Well, then that means you had to have surveillance that they were trafficking drugs, having sales. So how's it going to look? You're investigating somebody for God knows how long. Come on, let's keep it real now. And then on the day of the raid, you ain't got nothing to show. Oh, just $1,000. But let's just say maybe $20,000 was in the house. Half a key was in the house, or heroin or weed or whatever the drug is. You're going to take all the drugs because you're going to resell that, aren't you? Yeah, we're going to bring you commentary about that too. Dirty cop, Louisville police officer, a new cop gives the dope to the girlfriend to traffic. How about that? Takes all kinds. And these are the people who are supposed to be serving and protecting the community. And yes, we've heard that they do not make a lot of money. But guess what? That sounds like a personal problem to me, because in the end, it is your choice what profession you choose. So you knew, such as most people who go into any profession, you know the expected pay rate of that said job. So if starting out as a cop, you're only making $23,000, $26,000, whatever the amount is, if that's not conducive for you, then don't do it. Teachers get paid less, police officers get paid less, and social workers get paid less. Everybody knows this. Nothing has changed. You have to work your way up the rank in the police department to get a high pay grade, unless you're in a major city such as New York City. You can get in the mid $50,000, $60,000 as a detective. So you got to work your way up. And everybody knows that's really not any money in New York because the cost of living is high. So even $55,000 ain't no money. But hey, it can be a lot if you're stealing from people during raids, stripping people's money, pulling them over during traffic stops, taking their jewelry, any valuables they have in their car. Oh, you can make a whole lot of money. See, the hustle is great for everybody, is it not? It's always beware of the thug, the dope man, the stick-up man, the con artist. But we have officers who are supposed to protect and serve, and they're no different than the dope man, the stick-up man, the guy that robs convenience stores, breaks in people's houses. You're just wearing a suit that says to protect and serve. But you're no different. If you go in a house and raid a house for drugs and money, allegedly, and you're coming out of there with that said information, or let's say goods, and also stealing people's jewelry, wedding rings, whatever you find to your liking. Imagine that. Watching somebody come in your house and steal your damn rings and jewelry, and they're the damn police. And now you got to go tell somebody in authority that they stole your jewelry. Okay? They stole your laptop. Very interesting information. The subject matter is still Louisville, Kentucky. Dirty cops. We're going to break it down. We're going to talk about one of those officers that was involved in the shooting of Breonna Taylor. He's not been such a kind person. Don't have respect for the law. Crooked cop. Sexually assaulting women. Very sick. Thank you all for joining me. This is Everyday Shenanigans. That information I just brought you was WLKY pertaining to sexual misconduct allegations at the LMPD. Let's talk about another officer. I believe this one was also Louisville, Kentucky. One second. No. That's somebody else. I'm not going to talk about that one. But it's on my community post if you need information pertaining to Richard Fisher, who was sentenced to 5 years. Hold on one second. I'm trying to bring up everybody. I want to bring up something out west, and this isn't pertaining to crooked cops. This is not about Louisville, Kentucky, a Louisville, Kentucky officer, but I just want to show you what is going on in our police departments for those who may not have any idea of what is going on. This is a sample case. Honorable discharge. Officer accused of groping handcuffed woman. Bounced between departments. This is KSAT. This is coming from out west. It's very sick information.
Problem in Texas with no solutions in sight. So-called wandering officers, members of law enforcement who get into serious trouble, then land somewhere else, in part because the state has no oversight of their conduct. And this Defenders report that I-Team's Dylan Collier introduces you to Roberto Moreno, whose meandering journey between Texas departments ended with him being charged with a felony and facing a federal lawsuit for his alleged treatment of a woman in his custody.
Our story begins and ends here in the small town of Taft, population right around 3,000. As a San Antonio area woman returned home with her family after visiting the coast in August 2019, she came into contact with Officer Roberto Moreno. A traffic stop turned into an arrest for suspicion of drug possession. After Moreno handcuffed the woman and unsuccessfully attempted to shut off his body-worn camera, according to this federal civil rights lawsuit, she remarked that she would go for a full body cavity search as long as Moreno did it.
Even if she asked him to touch her, it should have never happened.
Exactly.
Attorney Robert F. White filed the suit on behalf of the woman late last year. He detailed the brief flirtation and what allegedly happened to her next.
He reached in and groped her and then tried to kiss her, and she turned away when he tried to kiss her, and she says something about, that was wrong, I shouldn't have done that, and she starts to get uncomfortable.
A week after the woman's arrest, the Texas Rangers were made aware of her allegation against Moreno. Following a 2-week investigation, the officer was busted on a felony charge, improper sexual activity with a person in custody. What's emerged during the nearly 2 years since Moreno's booking is the portrait of an officer allowed to skate on rule-breaking time and time again.
We trust our PD to thoroughly vet police officers, and they just don't do it. And come on in.
In an effort to better understand Moreno's choppy career in law enforcement, the defenders last month traveled to the Coastal Bend. A one-time cadet of the Corpus Christi Police Department, Moreno acknowledged that he had been kicked out of the academy in early 2014, 3 days before graduation. His written statement, part of a subsequent job application, did not include a reason for his expulsion. And CCPD officials late last month also refused to tell us why, writing in an appeal to the state attorney general that the information would be considered highly intimate or embarrassing. Often on stints as a jailer at 2 detention centers did not result in any discipline issues or investigations for misconduct, according to records obtained by us. But the same cannot be said for Moreno's 26-month tenure as an officer for the Beeville Police Department. The defenders found at least 8 write-ups of Moreno from August 2016 to the fall of 2017 for rules violations like not showing up for duty, rude behavior, and abusive language. That October, Moreno was fired after an internal affairs investigation determined he was repeatedly having sex with a woman while on duty, often in a marked patrol vehicle. Wow. Moreno later confronted the woman at her home after she began to tell others about the affair, according to his personnel file. Moreno's termination paperwork reveals that 3 other women had also filed formal complaints against him, each taking issue with the manner in which he approached them, and that questions he asked made them feel uncomfortable.
They detail a pattern of misconduct and what could arguably be considered predatory in nature.
Moreno appealed his termination, but ultimately resigned a few months later.
Even your plumber or your barber has more regulatory oversight.
Scott Henson is the policy director for Just Liberty, a nonpartisan justice reform group. He says you can count Moreno among the thousands of police officers in Texas who have been able to take advantage of the fact that the agency that licenses peace officers, TCOL, has no authority to investigate their conduct, leaving, quote, current regulation that is by and large toothless and a fragmented, outdated system, according to an analysis of the agency presented to the state legislature earlier this year.
It's already incredibly difficult to hold officers accountable at the local level. The state's doing virtually nothing.
But Moreno's misconduct issues in Beeville did not mark the end of his law enforcement career. Far from it. The department issued him an honorable discharge in early 2018, which allowed him to land another law enforcement job, this time working for the city of Taft. Now employed by an even smaller agency, Moreno's issues escalated. After being reprimanded for accusing 2 people of theft in a social media post, Moreno was then suspended 4 days for a heated parking dispute with a resident. Moreno handed that suspension the same day of the alleged groping incident. And just like with Beeville, Moreno was allowed to resign, writing in his exit interview, quote, "Everything was perfect here. I'm going to miss this place." August 22nd, 2019, as the Rangers were moving to arrest Moreno, then Taft Police Chief John Cornish handed him yet another honorable discharge. Cornish left the agency late last year, 8 days after Taft was named a defendant in the civil rights lawsuit. After current Taft police officials referred our questions about Moreno to Cornish, we were able to speak to him briefly at his home outside Corpus.
John? Cornish, hi, Dylan Collier with KSAT 12. Hear about Roberto Moreno and his tenure with the Taft Police Department? Wondering why you gave him an honorable discharge after the allegations against him. My lawyers. Who's that? You didn't tell us who your lawyers were.
Said call my lawyers.
He is
That's
in the
funny.
process of having Cornish deposed. Specifically Cornish in the city of Taft. Where did they fail in
Low
this
rent town.
situation?
I think they failed the moment they signed him on as an officer. You know, he should have never been a police officer anywhere.
For the defenders, Dylan Collier, KSAT 12 News.
Roberto Moreno's family asked us to leave their property when we stopped by for comment last month. He is scheduled to appear in court in San Patricio County for a plea hearing in his criminal case on July 20th. A timeline of Moreno's long list of run-ins while on the job can be found right now on KSAT.com.
All right, everybody. That's KSAT 12 News out of Texas. If you need verification, this is an article from 10 months ago, this information that I just brought you. This is just a sample commentary pertaining to dirty cops. They have the subject matter of this live pertaining to Breonna Taylor. As you see with Moreno, he's a sadist. He used his position, his profession to grope women, be abusive by his tongue, not show up for work. He just did what he wanted to do. And I don't understand how he was able to go from one precinct to another. Naturally, he chose a small town, Taft, because he probably knew he could get away with a whole lot more with not having anybody watching over him. But then the flip side of that is cops are working big departments, and they're still doing what the hell they want until they get caught, until somebody cries wolf. And in his case, a few women came forward to say he violated their civil rights, civil liberties, touching them inappropriately, having relationships with women on the job, in the car. Now, that's pretty brazen to be having sex with a woman in a police car. You don't even think that another cop could pull up while you're on duty, or another civilian's car could pass you wherever you were parked. I'm assuming he parked somewhere ducked off. But then when you have this type of attitude, this God complex, because I think a lot of cops have this complex about them, that they are God, they cannot be taken down. They'll do whatever they want, even visibly, broad daylight, don't care. I am God. You need me. No, sir, we don't need you. Very wicked. And the fact that that woman wanted him to grope her, I thought that was strange. Makes me wonder if she had any contact with him before, but then go on to say, well, this isn't looking right, ain't right. Then she comes forward to say, touching her inappropriately. So you don't know what these officers are doing when they're on the clock and off the clock. And another thing I want to touch on is about mental evaluations that they take. They may pass the physical part of the exam, but the mental evaluation is the problem with many people, period. They're passing these mental evaluations because they're answering the questions as a sociopath would answer. You answer what you think is the right answer. Doesn't mean you actually feel that way, such as, do you think it's right to steal from your job? Naturally, he or she would answer, yes, I feel it's wrong to steal from your job. But it doesn't mean that in their mind, that's how they actually feel. In their mind, they may think, yeah, ain't nothing wrong with taking stuff from the job, lying in on documents, forging documents. Do you understand what I'm saying? Who's going to tell you the truth on an exam? Yeah, I'm a narcissist. I'm an asswipe. I'm a sadist. I'm a racist. I don't like women. Don't like children. Don't like this, that. Hate everybody. But I want to be a cop. You have narcissists in every field known to man and woman. And that's the problem with the world, is that we have sociopaths and narcissists in every position, from the garbage man all the way up to, hell, even the White House. Do you understand what I'm saying? People are people. People have been afforded great positions in life, positions of authority, and they take these exams to get these jobs, Q clearances to work for the government, but they're not mentally stable, and they do not need to be in the positions that they have been afforded to have. And you're not going to find out until it's too late that something's wrong, because 9 times out of 10, whoever's over him or her pushes things under the rug, which happened with Moreno. Keep letting him go to go on and wreak havoc to the next place. Such as the same thing with the priesthood. It's the same thing. You knew what he was doing. You had the allegations. You heard the allegations. And instead of you reprimanding that priest, you send him somewhere else to wreak havoc on the next parish. So it's the same thing. It's very sick information. Hopefully he will get jail time for his crimes, Mr. Moreno, because he deserves them as well. He had no business being in law enforcement. And I didn't really understand the information in his commentary about a certain agency that's supposed to watch over them. I thought if you work for the police department, they have their own separate entity that monitors police officers' actions and any type of wayward behavior of them is to be analyzed properly. But we now know that can be fudged and pushed under the rug. And I'm sure it happens with many officers, male and female. Okay. That was information coming out of Texas pertaining to a dirty cop. As I said, I brought you information about Vice News investigation into sexual misconduct allegations at the LMPD, Louisville, Kentucky. KSAT, I brought you information about a crooked cop, Moreno, as a reference. This is something that happened 2 years ago. African-American woman files a lawsuit against LMPD claiming he groped her during traffic stop. KLKY News Louisville is the source. Thank you for joining me.
Police officer claiming he groped her during a traffic stop. Tonight, we have body camera video showing the interaction.
I'm sorry.
No,
It's just the way he did.
He's a new officer. I'm training him, but that's why.
I'm sorry. I thought it.
The lawsuit claims Officer Tyler Guillen'S inappropriately touched Kaylee Coates twice during a search last January in the Parkland neighborhood. Video shows Coates becoming visibly upset as the officer searches her. A second officer stops Guillen'S and then tells Coates the officer is new and did not use the proper technique. Coates' attorney says the officer should have been better trained.
This young lady was physically violated. That's important. So if that means this lawsuit brings the attention to the whole force, then that's what this does. But this young lady needs to be placed back whole.
Coates is suing both the officer and the city of Louisville for assault, infliction of emotional distress, and violating her constitutional rights. LMPD says it does not comment on pending lawsuits.
All right, that was 2 years ago. African-American female filing a lawsuit against Coates. Let's talk about Brett Hankison. It's been a busy bee. This was a year ago. And allegations were brought against him, sexual assault. WHAS 11 is the source. Thank you for joining me. This is an all-inclusive live pertaining to 3 subject matters pertaining to women. Vanessa Guillén, Breonna Taylor, Sherra Wright. First commentary by Sherra Wright has already been given. If you need to go back to the beginning of the video, replay, she's been denied parole in the facilitation of murder of her ex-husband, Lorenzen Wright.
Coming forward with
accusations of sexual assault against LMPD officer Brett Hankison, one of the officers involved in the Breonna Taylor shooting. Tonight, the mayor is asking for outside agencies to investigate the allegations, and he wants the officer off of the LMPD merit board. Shay McAllister is digging into the allegations tonight.
Two women, similar stories, both start at the end of their night. After they say they left a bar, and Officer Brett Hankison offered them a ride home. We found the allegations posted on Facebook. One woman writes, "He drove me home in uniform in his marked car, invited himself into my apartment, and sexually assaulted me while I was unconscious." A second woman says, "He began making sexual advances towards me, rubbing my thigh, kissing my forehead, and calling me baby." Mayor Greg Fisher speaking out on the allegations Thursday, asking for a bigger investigation involving the Kentucky Public Corruption Task Force. He also demanded the River City FOP remove Hankison from his position on the Louisville Police Merit Board, which reviews disciplinary appeals. Fisher said, "Given the very serious allegations against him and the investigations by the Attorney General and the FBI, it is profoundly inappropriate for him to be in this role." We called FOP President Ryan Nichols about the request.
I do not have that authority, and no, I don't intend to try to obtain that authority to do that.
He says he can't remove the officer from the board, but even if he could, he wouldn't.
But everyone is entitled to that right to be investigated. Anyone can make a claim about anything. It should be investigated, and if those allegations are proved to be true, then they would be addressed accordingly.
The mayor says he will work with Metro Council and the county attorney to remove Hankison from the board if the FOP fails to do so. And the investigation now sits in the hands of the Kentucky Public Corruption Task Force. The mayor says he has asked LMPD not to submit any cases to the Police Merit Board until the investigation is complete.
WHAS 11 is the source for this information. So Hankison, I said Hankison, excuse me for a mispronunciation. This is the same cop that's involved in the murder of Breonna Taylor. Now you have allegations from different women that he's touched them inappropriately, picking them up in his car from a bar, kissing, touching him inappropriately on the thigh. He knew better. So what are the odds? Just some random women going to say you've been touching him. And that's this commentary repeats that, yes, anybody can bring forth an allegation. This is true. It's not to say that people can't get in cahoots and say, hey, let's go say that this cop did this or this person did this. But do I believe that? Do I believe they made this up? Probably not. You see, sometimes it takes one bad situation, such as the murder of Breonna Taylor, for other things to come forward and come to the light. And we've learned this in life, that people get away with all types of things that people know about, hear about, and nobody does anything. But it takes that one incident, maybe one more minute or big incident, such as with the murder of a black woman. Bang, bang, shoot 'em up, going in her house, looking for dope, money. That all this other stuff starts to slide out from up underneath the rug, touching women inappropriately. And the mayor's trying to get him off. In this commentary at that time, 10 months ago, off the merit board. But his superiors are saying, nah, we got to wait to see what happens first. We got to see what happens first. We can't just remove people off of he said, she said. Well, we'll see. Very sick information. Thank you for joining me. This will be a bit winded live because I'm bringing forward information pertaining to this Hankison, who's also involved in the murder of Breonna Taylor, missing money from her said apartment by the ex-boyfriend and current boyfriend. It's a very weird business going on. WHAS 11 is that commentary pertaining to Hankison being involved in a sexual assault. Make sure I get all this out. Let's see. This is another article. LMPD officer under investigation for sexual assault.
One of the officers involved in the Breonna Taylor
I don't know
shooting
if I ever
tonight,
played this or
the
not.
mayor is asking for outside agencies to investigate.
Hold on 1 minute. I think I played that one already. Let me go back. Because they're all running the same. Hold on 1 second.
We're also following a late developing story here tonight at 6, a lawsuit against the fired LMPD officer Brett Hankison.
He was fired.
Accuses him of using a, quote, playbook to target young, drunk women while he was in uniform. If Hankison's name sounds familiar to you, it's because he was one of the officers involved in the Breonna Taylor case. But this civil case stretches back to 2018, when the woman behind the lawsuit was a law student drinking at Tin Roof in Louisville. She claims Hankison was working off duty there when he offered her a ride home and then assaulted her. Sam Aguiar represents the woman and says LMPD ignored complaints against Hankison. Just in the last hour, LMPD told us they couldn't comment publicly on the pending lawsuit.
Can't go back in time and say, you know, we want the results here to be that we go in a time machine and you fire Brett Hankison early on and he doesn't do this to all these women. You can't do that. So you have to ask for money damages.
We contacted the attorneys who represented Hankison in the Breonna Taylor case, but so far none are representing him in this lawsuit. The night team's Jesse Cohen will have a full report on the allegations coming up here at 11 o'clock.
All right, everybody. Said information by WHAS 1111. By WHAS 11, excuse me. So he was fired. Well, see, now think about the superior who said, oh, we're not going to take him off the merit board until we get all the information in. Why'd you fire him? Because I know you wouldn't have left him on the merit board and he's been fired. So they had something against him. Then they said he had a playbook. So that means they found evidence to make that claim. What was the playbook? Go out hunting, bars where the women are inebriated and play hero. Hi, you need some help? You need a ride home? I'll be your Uber. And then take advantage of the women. Now, let's say, for the record, he's gone past groping and kissing foreheads. He's actually took the goodies. Are there some women out there who he actually raped? Just asking. Because my thing is, you're bold enough to touch a person inappropriately without their permission. Why would I not think that you would go all the way and rip their clothes off and sexually assault them? Just saying. Very sick information. See, it goes to show you don't know people. You don't know people at all. And my condolences to Master P. He has just announced the death of his daughter, Tatiana Miller, at 29. When I just go into that information, I'll bring it to you a little bit later. Prayers to the Miller family. All right. What else do we have on this dirty cop? Thank you all so much for joining me. It's a beautiful night here in the high 10. I decided to sit out and do the lives. I do this live to bring you this information pertaining to 3 women. One who's incarcerated for the murder of her ex-husband, Breonna Taylor, crooked cops from Louisville, Kentucky. And then the last story will be pertaining to Miss Vanessa Guillén, who is no longer living, killed by an Army comrade 2 years ago. Thank you all so much for your patience. I'll make sure I bring everything I wanted to discuss in this live pertaining to this nasty cop. If you want to hear about graphic content or content, pertaining to these dirty cops, Vice is the source. I'm going to play you just a little bit of this information, and you can feel free to go to their YouTube channel to get the said information. I'll play you just bits and pieces of that because it's almost not quite an hour. So I'll just play you bits and pieces of women who brought forth allegations against officers that work for the Louisville Police Department.
This interview of your own free will.
Yes. Well, and we were pulled over and got out of the car, and we were separated. I had some possession of hypodermic needle charges. I told him that I was on parole and I couldn't afford a charge. And he said, well, give me your number so I can work with you. He's like, I'll call you later tonight and we'll discuss your charges. You're going to have to come down here and fill out paperwork. I filled out the paperwork. He took pictures of me, like let me turn around. Within probably 10 minutes of the text conversation, it went to just different sexual comments. We'll have sex in my truck and I'll make these charges go away. He sent me a picture. What was that picture of? His genitalia. His penis. Yeah. How many times do you think you had warrants and he let you go without locking you up?
He's never let me go without giving him pay.
Why did you continue texting with him when he's texting all this? Because I'm unfortunate.
He's a narcotic police. He can
These are different women speaking interchangeably. As you listen carefully, you'll hear the different voices speak. The one that strikes me very interesting is the one who says, on every warrant, he let her go if she gave him fellatio. Did you hear what I just said? She performed oral sex on him. That was her only way of getting out of the warrant. This is crazy to me.
I witnessed her about drugs. You know, that's going to violate my parole.
He tried to have that leverage over me.
I knew he had that over my head. He's a cop. He has a gun. He has total authority over me. You know, what am I going to do?
They show police reports across the screen, unfounded on the allegations against said officers. Louisville, Kentucky. This is the subject. Thank you. Vice is the source.
I seen the Snapchat username, which is BTBailey58. So I kind of like thought about it for a minute, and I was like, there's no way. What would this cop, this detective, want to add me on Snapchat for, you know?
In 2016, Tommy Robinson was caught up in a drug bust. A year after the arrest, she says she started getting messages from one of the arresting officers, Brian Bailey.
He would sometimes ask me if I knew anybody that he could bust for drugs. Progressively, he started sending inappropriate pictures of his penis, or ask for pictures of me. Like, he'd be like, oh, send me a picture of your ass or your boobs. And I'm like, what? No.
How many pics of his penis would you say he sent you?
I would say close to 100.
100. Jesus, come on.
I mean, I would say that over the course from 2017 up until 2021. I mean, that's how long he was Snapchatting me.
4 years.
At some point, does he go from
Hello,
sending
Deborah.
these inappropriate pictures to asking to meet up?
Yes. Around February of 2017, Bailey was Snapchatting me and was like asking me what I was doing, and I told him like where I was at, and he was like, well, I'm in that area. And I got in the car with him. I was still going through my court case, so I was thinking maybe.
I'm going to stop right there. This is a blonde-haired female being interviewed. You can go over to the Vice channel to see the interview for yourself. She does show her face with the interviewer. So when you're done watching this content, if you have time this evening, feel free to go over to the Vice channel, subscribe, and watch their said content. This interview is off of that network. The thing that's baffling here is that one would ask themselves the obvious question. Why would this lady continue to engage with the cop on Snapchat? That's number one. 2, why didn't you block him when you saw he was sending pictures of his penis? Now, we're all human. Maybe she got turned on by looking at his penis. I don't know. But the point is, you had to have known it was going to lead to outside of just sending photographs. Because in the end, there's got to be a point. He's sending you photographs. Next, he wants you to send him something. You know, first he's going to bait you. What do you think of it? Do you like it? Hey, why don't you send me something? You're a pretty girl, blah, blah, blah. See what I'm saying? And if she's been in trouble before, Possibly he knew this and he found her on Snapchat deliberately. Stay woke. Because they have access to social media, police officers. This is how they catch a lot of fugitives and people who are breaking the law because people stupidly talk and tell their dumb business, stupid acts on social media, such as Facebook. So did he willingly seek her out, knowing she's been in trouble before? You will hear her go on, but I wanted to bring that up before I let her finish saying what happened, because one is going to question, why would she engage in conversation with a cop, first of all? Two, continue to accept photographs from him and not block him. Hello, Marge. How you doing? Thank you all for joining me. As they say, it's the reason for the season. Lord have mercy.
Like, you know, if I don't piss him off, maybe he could help me. But he tried to, like, make a move. Like, he kind of just, like, touched my leg and leaned in or, like, kissed me. I don't know, I just got creeped out. I knew that there was no way I was the only one that he was talking to like that. It just came too easy for him to talk the way he was.
Robinson's charges were eventually dismissed, but she kept hearing from Bailey. She was far from the only woman he was soliciting for sex. And Bailey isn't the only LMPD officer to engage in this type of behavior.
Internal documents and recordings going back more than a decade, and interviews with multiple accusers, as well as current and former members of LMPD, show a pattern of sexual misconduct by officers and repeated failure of the department to take allegations seriously. By not thoroughly investigating initial complaints, LMPD allowed problem officers to continue acting unchecked, and in some cases, to victimize more women. Do you know of anyone else that has had a similar experience with Bailey?
I have a friend that also had the same experience with him. The Snapchats, promises to get you out of trouble if you do so and so.
Louisville Metro Police Department Public Integrity Unit official statement. Today's date is Tuesday, February the 16th of 2016. Present.
Robinson didn't know it at the time, but less than a month before her arrest, LMPD's Public Integrity Unit, which investigates potential crimes by officers, had already opened an investigation into allegations that Bailey was sexually coercing her friend Megan. In her first interview, Megan was reluctant to tell investigators the full extent of Bailey's behavior, and her fears were validated days later when she says she got a text from Bailey that said, "I knew you were solid."
The police were investigating the police, in my opinion. That's the way I looked at it. So I knew what Detective Bailey was capable of, and so I don't look at them the same anymore. Them as in police officers.
And was that confirmed when Bailey texted you within the week after you gave the
Yes, and I knew I had did the right thing.
Do you know if one of the LMPD investigators who talked to you or some other officer had told Bailey what you had said?
There were only 3 of us there, so I didn't.
All right, sorry about that. Brief break.
Had told Bailey what you had said?
There were only 3 of us there, so I didn't.
But 2 weeks after she says Bailey texted, Megan called investigators back anyway to disclose more details.
He was sending me pictures of his penis, which I have on my phone, and I'm not going to lie to you, I had to flirt with him, because if not, then he had already told me that with my drug charge, I wouldn't even be able to go on a field trip with my daughter or anything.
According to the case file, investigators lost track of her after this call and never got the phone she said contained evidence. 6 months later, they asked Bailey for an interview. He said no, and they closed the case, clearing Bailey. 3 years after that, another woman, who we'll call Jane Doe, and who'd worked for Bailey as an informant, came forward with an even more serious allegation.
I got arrested. Okay. When I got out, he showed up and told me I owed him. Owed him one. Pretty much that's what he wanted was his dick sucked. He'd call me up or text me and say, you owe me.
At the time, investigators made it clear that they weren't going to check Bailey's phones just on her word.
Well, I have to have some reason to get the messages. I have to have some reason or some reasonable grounds to believe that mean, I'm telling you, like a couple different times I had oral sex with him. I saved the clothes.
Wow.
Jane Doe had DNA evidence.
Monica Lewinsky, shut up.
Forced LMPD's hand.
This is Sergeant Omar Lee, Louisville Metro Police Public Integrity Unit. Today's date is May the 20th of 2020. This will be a recorded statement with Officer Brian Bailey.
It took 3 months for LMPD to bring in Officer Bailey for an interview.
3 months.
It was the first time he'd ever been asked any questions about sexual misconduct in an official setting.
Have you ever asked for any kind of nude pictures of her or anything like that?
Don't believe so, no. We've been working together for 5 years, or at least, I mean, there's nothing.
And none of that time had ever crossed over into the...
No, we never went out on dates. She's a 55-year-old woman.
That's the allegation. So
55-year-old woman. She sounds a little bit older, a little hoarse.
Put you in that situation if it's not true, but that is the allegation. And she's saying that...
Let me stop right there. So initially, one woman is trying to talk to these people in authority, and they're not listening to her. So then 3 years later, here comes another lady who's an older lady. She has a very deep voice, sound like a smoker's voice. And you hear him saying in this commentary during the interview, she's an older lady. Well, sir, it doesn't really matter if she's older or young. She's putting her mouth on your penis, so does it really matter how old she is? But naturally, he has to play it down. Like, oh, she's older. I would never, 1, cross the line with my informant. 2, she's an older lady. Well, the act that she's performing has no bearing on her age, so long as she can perform the act. You don't really give a damn about her being 55 years of age. I thought that was very interesting. He would say that during this interview. I thought I'd throw that out there because that shows you the sociopath's mind, a narcissist. Try to downplay the act itself and use the person's age as a reason it could not have happened because she was older. Lord have mercy, I'm dead.
You were forcing her to perform oral sex in exchange for getting out of trouble. So I have to ask you straight up, and you're saying no, this never occurred.
I mean, I'm scared. Obviously, I don't know. No.
And she had a shirt with semen on it that she says is yours. So she has saved that shirt for quite some time. We've sent that to the lab. Lab comes back that it is bodily fluids. So I have a search warrant for your DNA today.
Woo!
I guess I need to ask for an attorney at this point.
During Bailey's interview, investigators implied that Jane Doe might be the one who was lying.
Omar's not going to charge you with anything. You know, we don't have proof. Right. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. She's basically alleging official misconduct because she is saying that you basically, or she was forced into a position to give you oral sex in exchange for getting out of trouble. So, and then with her having the DNA, I had to go the next step to either validate or disprove her story.
And I told him, you know, if it's disproving, we're going to pursue her as much as we would pursue anything.
Correct. Free to leave, my friend.
All right, thank you.
Very interesting information here in this interview.
Appreciate you coming down and cooperating with me.
It took another 11 months before the DNA proved she was telling the truth. The semen...
Hold on, right there. See, this is where you know he's guilty. You have been brought into an interrogation room by your superiors. Finally, years later, and you know what you've been doing out there in the street with other women, persons. And they're asking you about your relationship with the informant. And you're playing it off. Like I said, blaming the age. Oh, no, I wouldn't do anything with a 55-year-old woman. You could have stopped the interview right then. Could have said, well, if this is why you have me down here, I'm going to blatantly tell you I haven't had anything to do with she or any other women. But as this superior says, I have to press forward to either disprove this allegation, you know, to move forward. And you hear him stuttering, like, I'm scared. You're scared of what? See, right there, you knew he was guilty. Why would you be scared if you haven't had any sexual relations with any unknown participants or informants to help you in your drug investigations? It would just be easy to say, I've not had any relations with any informant, old or young. He says, I'm scared. Scared of what? Scared of getting caught. So then they introduced the DNA. Yes, this lady has kept items with fluid on them. See, he knew then he was cooked. He knew then he was cooked. So that's when he mentions, I guess I best get me a lawyer. What do you need a lawyer for? Stay woke. You haven't done anything, so why do you need a lawyer? You know you haven't had sex with this woman, so nothing would come back from the lab. Come on now, stay woke, everybody. One, you're saying you're scared. Then you're mentioning her age. You never mess with a 55-year-old woman. Then when they introduce that the woman has items with your DNA on it, you start talking about an attorney. Once again, proving you were involved with her. Because you could have flat out said, I've never had sex with her, so it doesn't matter. And if you excuse me, I gotta go. If there isn't anything else, you're not arresting me, blah, blah, blah. See, what I was hoping for in this interview, they had already tested the DNA and said, well, sir, you're saying you haven't been with her. Well, we've got DNA to say, yeah, you have. And then you also hear now, 11 months later, it took to get this DNA tested, which I'm sitting here thinking, my goodness, 11 months. But then this is also a small city, Kentucky. Maybe they have a lot of crimes to solve, and there really wouldn't be any rush to test DNA on one of our own. Stay woke. Very interesting information.
On Jane's t-shirt was Bailey's. And while investigators were waiting on the results, another woman came forward with an almost identical story.
How many times do you think you had warrants and he let you go without locking you up?
He's never let me go without giving him head, so.
Wow.
I mean, like 30, like I said, 30.
Okay. So every time?
Every time.
The woman said that Bailey held the threat of arrest over her if she didn't do what he wanted.
So when you say he forced you, has he ever threatened to hit you, hurt you?
No.
Has he ever pulled a weapon on you or anything like that?
But I was like, well, what if I don't do that? He's like, I'm gonna take you to jail.
One time, she says, he even threatened to plant heroin on her.
He said, like, bag of heroin. Not on my lap, but like, quiet. You know what I'm saying? Like, where'd that come from? Like, really? That's what I said.
Okay, and what happened after that?
I gave him a head.
Okay.
Head and twice. I mean, even though I'm on drugs, I don't think I was right. I just think all the times. And then I got so tired of just giving him head, which is like beginning to be an everyday thing. I went to Stanford crying. And I told Stanford, I was like, Stanford, I can't do this anymore.
This Stanford is Officer Stafford, another LMPD cop. She says she told him about what was going on about a year earlier.
I was like, Stanford, please, like, stop. Like, they gave me a phone number to call, and I never called it because I was too scared because I was going to go to jail.
Case files suggest that even though she was too scared to report, Officer Stafford called PIU, but it's unclear if investigators ever followed up. She and Jane Doe joined a third woman in suing Bailey and the department.
3 more women have come forward. All of them say Bailey sexually abused them.
The woman claims Detective Brian Bailey sexually assaulted her and threatened her with criminal charges.
In the lawsuit, the women say LMPD knew about Bailey's behavior and did nothing to stop it.
All right, everybody. Brief break. So here you get the information that one woman passed information on to a Officer Stafford. She doesn't know what he did with that information. Is it possible he did say something? And imagine another cop going to superiors to discuss another cop's dirty deeds. That wouldn't probably register very well, even though they're assigned to investigate cops. But it's just the notion of, hey, I'm telling on my own comrade. Somebody's going to find out I've been in this office, squealing on my fellow officer. And I think most officers possibly would be afraid of that getting out, being judged by their other comrades. And then he'd be able to snitch, telling on a fellow officer. This is very disturbing information. Thank you for joining me. Brief commercial break.
Bailey declined to comment, citing the ongoing case, but in a court filing denied the allegations. Still, even after the lawsuit was filed, Bailey continued sending inappropriate messages.
The last message was 51 weeks ago.
That's not even a year ago.
Yeah, right here. You can see.
BT Bailey 58.
Yep.
Court records in the civil suit show he was also sending dirty texts to multiple other women, including Megan, the woman who originally reported Bailey for sending sexually explicit pictures back in 2016. She testified that he'd gone further than that and abused her too.
He was aggressive. He was breathing all over my face and kissing all over my neck, and then he was ramming his fingers into my pants. And that type of stuff turned him on to be in control. He told me that.
Even though that criminal case was dismissed, were you still in fear of Brian Bailey?
Yes, because over the time period of us talking, he started telling me about, in his words, the real criminals are people like him.
Obviously.
Investigators waited until May 2021 to seize Bailey's phone, 15 months after Jane Doe was first interviewed.
15 months
Bailey
later.
was supposed to be interviewed a second time as part of a follow-up investigation into possible policy violations. But that never happened because he resigned the day before his scheduled interview. The number of women Bailey solicited is likely much higher than the handful who've come forward. Internal investigative files show that LMPD was made aware of at least 4 other women who'd been subject to similar behavior. No effort appears to have ever been made to reach them. The exchange of sexual favors for staying out of jail has been described to us as the deal, and the allegations aren't unique to Brian Bailey. In 2014, another narcotics officer, Carl Payne, pled guilty to official misconduct for soliciting women he'd arrested for sex in exchange for helping them out with their court cases. And at least 2 more LMPD narcotics officers have been accused of the same thing. One of them made headlines for another controversy.
Former LMPD officer Brett Hankison was there the night they executed a no-knock search warrant at Breonna Taylor's apartment in March of 2020.
Hankison, a detective at the time, fired multiple shots into a window.
I've done everything to increase my
Sorry about that. Before we go into that commentary of him shooting into the apartment of Breonna Taylor, as you see, this went on and on for years, and as this reporter reports, it's possible the number is high because I'm sure there are a lot of women who have not come forward. The one thing I'm concerned about are the women who still were obviously engaging in criminal behavior, because one would think, well, the first time he approached you, either on TikTok, Snapchat, however, you should have knew what time of day it was. He sought you out on purpose, and I do believe he did, because 2 of the women were friends. So he sought them out knowing their criminal element. Okay? Now, once he sent you the pictures, you know what time of day it is. That's why I said, why not block him? Kill that. And why not disengage from criminal activity? Because if you're living in an area where he's patrolling and he can find you, see you, arrest you, you already know the game. And he's let it be known what the game is. You get in my peripheral, I'm going to touch and grope, and I'm going to make you do it to make your charges go away. So when you have these women talking, you have to ask yourself the ultimate question. Why would you still continue to engage in criminal behavior, knowing there's a chance that this crooked cop or any other cop could solicit you for sex or basically bribe you into sexual relations to make your charges go away? And the flip side of also telling a woman, well, you do this to me, I want to arrest you. Who's to say that you performed the sexual act with him and then he still put the damn handcuffs on you? So now you've given up your body to somebody who hoodwinked you into performing a sexual deed, and then they arrest you any damn way. So that's something I want you all to think about, is why the women continue to be in the street committing these crimes, knowing there's a chance that officers could arrest them and ask for sexual favors to make the charges go away.
I was actually sitting here. This picture was on TV, and I just cried, and I was shocked in myself that my emotions were still so strong after that many years.
In 2014, Detective Brett Hankison raided the hotel room where Brittany McKinney was bringing clients she met on Backpage, a site commonly used for sex work. Officers found drugs and threatened to arrest her.
Brett took me outside on the balcony, and he was like, well, the options were you turn in 3 people. And then he pretty much brought up like I could hook up with him, and he wouldn't turn the ticket in either.
When you heard that, were you surprised?
No. Once he told me about the pictures on Backpage that he had seen all those, like he knew like the shorts, like shoes, everything. Described pictures that had already been deleted, like for a long time. So at this point, I knew he'd been like, watched me for a while, kind of like almost like.
That's the point I made.
You know, I was an easy target because I was doing Backpage.
Salt these people out.
I would probably easily have sex with him.
McKinney was on probation at the time, and an arrest could have sent her back to jail. So she agreed to be a confidential informant. Hankison wrote her citation, but didn't turn it in. Instead, he held on to it, in case she failed to hold up her end of the deal.
I mean, in a way, I almost felt like I had to be like nice to him or flirt with him in a way, because I felt like if I completely just disregarded him right off the bat, that he would just turn my ticket in.
What sort of stuff would Hankison say to you over the phone?
Like how he thought I was just sexy, and I felt like he almost thought I would want to have, like, you know, you want to hook up with like an officer, like this was like a prize for me to hook up with like somebody like him. He was very like aggressive and pushy toward me. I didn't like that at all.
How pushy did he get during these interactions?
I mean, the last interaction we had, I met him at this warehouse, which I don't really like talking about. It makes me cry, but he was just like really terrible to me.
Almost a month after meeting McKinney, Hankison filed the charges he'd been sitting on. Then, 2 months later, he called McKinney's parole officer to ask why her probation hadn't been revoked. The parole officer confronted McKinney about what was going on, and then reported Hankison to LMPD.
Okay, I'm gonna stop right there. How in the world could he turn in a ticket of a warrant or whatever a month later because he didn't get his way with her? This makes no sense to me. Now, what would the superior say? Sir, why have you been holding this ticket? See, none of this makes any sense. Because if you're going somewhere to do a raid, let's say, or whatever type of raid it is, this has already been pre-planned with superiors and the officers exacting the raid. So how in the world are you just going to wait a month, 2, or whatever to turn a ticket citation in on the said persons or parties? This makes no logical sense to me. So you already know that these people are in cahoots with each other, covering up the dirty deeds of their officers and also possibly superiors as well, because he was a detective, so he wasn't a regular officer. This makes no sense to me. He turned in a citation a month later. And thank God she did tell, you know, her parole officer what was going on, or probation officer what was going on, and that person confronted him. Because what are you doing calling her parole officer asking why she hasn't been violated? What do you care? It's not your job. It's not your job to be calling. So you're taking a personal interest in somebody who you are bribing for sexual favors, and then you're calling their parole officer to say, well, why haven't they been violated? Gee, Wally, I don't know why they haven't been. You're turning in late tickets on the said parties, and now we're supposed to jump through hula hoops because you're out here having sex with them. You didn't get your way with 1 or 2 or whomever, and now you want us to violate them. You know, that's brazen as hell. Just when you think you've heard it all. All this is nonsense to me. crazy. But once again, I'm still going to ask these women, why did you all engage in the behavior? Because at some point, you have to be in his or their peripheral for the act to be axed. So why not say, I'm going to go work somewhere else or get high somewhere else, or a whole different jurisdiction, or stop altogether, as not to be confronted in an arrest or raid by these said nasty officers? I mean, you have to ask those questions.
Louisville Metro Police Department Public Integrity Unit official statement. Miss McKinney, are you aware this interview is being audio recorded?
Yes.
Were you afraid to talk to PIU about what happened?
Yeah. At first, I wasn't going to talk to him just because I was doing like the shady stuff I was doing. And I felt like, you know, they were going to use like what I was doing anyways, like Backpage, and I was on drugs. They could use that against me as well. And I feel like they kind of, you know, looked down on me type of thing anyways.
When McKinney told investigators she was also working with another officer, investigators latched onto it and then used it against her.
We just asked you something like, even if both these officers in headquarters get your charges dismissed or not turned in?
It was terrible. He kind of like belittled me in a way. And some of it he acted like I was making up too. And so I was just so against Brett. If I had sex with the other cop, if that's why I wasn't telling on him.
You're not the special one if these guys are doing this stuff. I don't know. But if you think you're the special one, you better get over it now. Because I can guarantee you what will happen if we go over and talk to both of them. They throw you under the bus so fast and so hard, your head be spinning.
Yeah, of course.
That's exactly what Hankison did when investigators brought him in for an interview 6 months later.
Instantly, I started thinking that, like, she's going to want to try to just get her shit dismissed by fucking me or whatever. So I was like, I don't know if I feel comfortable using her as a CI. Well, Sarge's like, dude, you know as well as I do, these CIs are fucking dime a dozen. They're like, you know, we use them and abuse them anyway, you know, and get what we can out of them. He said, I don't think it's worth getting kind of trick bag or whatever for you to use this girl because obviously she's bad news.
All right, everybody. That's a good, interesting comment, because one could say there's some truth to that. You're using people who are in the street, using drugs, stealing, conning people, doing all type of things to get their high. So why would you trust the informant? And it's not to say that a informant can't be truthful at some point, but we know that even going into courtrooms, people tend not to believe informants for that very reason. It's because they stay in the street doing seedy things to get their drugs and also participate in crimes. So why would I believe this person? And it's not to say, as I said, that he or she cannot give truthful information. But a lot of informants are looked down upon as giving information and also going into court to testify. A lot of times they won't show up. They will talk around in circles, being on the witness stand. They will change their story, their version, or as I said, renege altogether and take the fifth and just say, I don't have anything to say. But this man, obviously, Hankison, was a dirty cop, and he liked touching and groping women in general. And I don't think it mattered who the women were. If they were women he picked up on the job, working off duty at bars, the grocery store, the mall, informants, I don't think it would have mattered. But you see, the element here is that you're already in the street doing dirty things. Why the hell am I going to believe you? And you hear the officer saying, well, don't think that you're special. Because if I go over to these two guys, put them together, they're going to throw you under the bus. And of course they're going to throw you under the bus because it's their job on the line. No matter if they solicited these women or not, bribed these women or not, attempted to bribe these women for sexual favors, they're going to preserve their job. And one could say, well, hell, they don't care about their jobs. They don't care about their own self, their own reputation, their image. But see, that's not the point. When you're doing wrong, you're not worried about your image at that time. You're getting what you want, which is self-gratification, no matter what the act is. You ain't thinking about your job, your family, your friends, your reputation. You're thinking about what you're getting at that time. Now, you may have a small percentage of people who are actually thinking, damn, what if I get caught? What if somebody goes back and says something, catches me? But you still go ahead with the act anyway. And obviously, Hankison liked what he was doing. He used his position as an officer to grope women, and God knows what else he's done. Probably stole drugs from people's houses, persons, money. I think he's that guy. He's just an all-around crook. And that's one woman says in his commentary. He basically said, we are the bad guys. I am that bad guy. Not that guy in the street. But I am that bad guy.
on his account was directly contradicted by material evidence. Hankison claimed he only ever communicated with McKinney on his work phone, which he voluntarily handed over. And investigators used the records to discredit McKinney, pointing to sexually explicit texts she'd sent that Hankison never responded to.
But you were sending him pictures or sending him text. The way I interpret it is you were open for a sexual relationship. Is that not what those texts would indicate to you?
Mm-hmm.
But those same records suggest that Hankison was also using another phone to communicate with McKinney.
Exactly.
The last time the two spoke over his work phone was October 10th, 2014. But they both told investigators that they continued talking for weeks. And one of McKinney's texts references a call on October 13th. But there's no record of a missed call on Hankison's work phone. McKinney told investigators that Hankison was using another number, but they never tried to get that phone. And they never really tried to resolve what actually happened at the warehouse. You never told Internal Affairs about what happened outside of the warehouse?
I mean, I kind of told Internal Affairs a little bit. I told him that he'd asked me to meet him there. He asked me to meet him one night in Taylorsville at a warehouse. And I did. I met him there. And he was in a truck. And he pretty much trying to fuck me. And they kind of just disregarded what I had to say and kind of like blew me off and didn't believe me. Or I'm not sure if they didn't believe me or they just didn't care.
Would you be shocked to learn that she told us that she actually met you at a warehouse while you're off duty?
No. Like
That wouldn't shock you?
like I was working off duty?
No, she said she come out, y'all had a conversation, and she met you out at a warehouse in Taylorsville near where you lived.
No, that's not true. And yes, that would say it was a lie. I don't believe that. Well, I mean, I believe that she told you that, but I've never met her outside of work, period, ever, one time. I don't know where there's any warehouses. Even I don't go to except to, I might go run in to get, a gallon of milk or something like that. I wouldn't be familiar with a warehouse he would meet at.
One thing Hankison did admit is trying to revoke McKinney's parole.
Interesting conclusion I would like to say. I think what he's upset with me about is that I'm the one who called the county criminal attorney's office myself. I took it upon myself to call them. This is the only reason I can think about, other than she got her feelings hurt because I wouldn't fuck her, that I've tried to get her revoked over in Floyd County, which is true. I did try. I mean, I don't think she was doing a good job on diversion when she's out prostitute on Backpage, so.
It never seemed to occur to investigators that this could have been retaliation. And this wasn't even the first time LMPD had received a sexual misconduct complaint against Hankison. According to a case file from another PIU investigation, in 2008, Hankison was accused of letting a woman off in exchange for oral sex. The case was closed without Hankison or any other officer being interviewed. McKinney's case was eventually closed too. PIU concluded that the allegations were proven false. They did recommend the case be investigated for any potential policy violations related to the handling of CIs, but that never happened.
I definitely blame him, of course, but of course it's bigger than Brett as well, right? I feel like Internal Affairs kind of, failed me. If maybe they would have taken me seriously or other women, maybe he wouldn't have done it to other women.
In 2020, Hankison was fired for his involvement in the raid that led to Breonna Taylor's death. That same year, a woman filed a lawsuit alleging that Hankison sexually assaulted her after driving her home from a bar where he worked off duty. The suit named several LMPD officers for failure to report and intervene sooner. In court filings, Hankison denied these allegations. Lawyers for LMPD called them defamatory and unsupported. The lawsuit was dismissed and is currently on appeal. When asked for comment on allegations of sexual misconduct, Hankison pointed out that they've been investigated by LMPD and closed without findings of wrongdoing.
Tennessee homeowners.
Woo! Sorry about that. I find that very interesting. Years of getting things on the books pertaining to investigations. So now we're talking about a crooked Internal Affairs Department. So why would you even sign up to be an investigator to investigate cops and not follow through with investigating the cops? That makes no sense. Because when you take on that position, That's what you're doing, is investigating cops for dirty deeds. So besides having dirty cops, dirty detectives, sexual sadists, we're now obviously looking at the issue with the Louisville Internal Affairs Department. The people that are supposed to be monitoring and watching over their officers for improprieties with civilians. This is bad. And the fact that this one sexual allegation assault is on appeal tells you everything you need to know. That all these allegations took forever to get interviews conducted, DNA tests, all of that, and pushed under the rug by authorities who obviously didn't want to do their job. But I believe the high-ups now, Justice Department, are involved in investigating all these crimes of these women, Breonna Taylor case, to show that there's something going on with the Louisville Police Department. And something needs to be done, because this isn't right. You're supposed to be out here to protect and serve the public, not be out here soliciting women and bribing women because you have some type of sexual fetish. And another thing to think about, have some of these acts gone past just oral sex? Has Hankison and other officers had full sex with the women and not used any protection? That's another thing to think about, because you have to use common sense with women and men who are out here using drugs. They're using needles, possibly dirty needles, passing needles among other participants, not using condoms, contraceptives, and you're out here willingly having sex with these women and men and not using any protection. Imagine that. And then God forbid you are a father, husband, got a girlfriend, and you're out here sleeping with street women and not using any type of protection. I thought I'd throw that in there as well. Thank you for joining me this Everyday Shenanigans.
The police department has made it difficult to get basic information and records. When we asked to see all internal investigations into sexual misconduct, LMPD refused, calling the request overly burdensome. They also refused to answer any questions or make any officers available for comment,
Sad, very
citing
sad.
ongoing litigation. But a current LMPD sex crimes detective agreed to sit down with us. We're hiding their identity because the police department has a strict policy against speaking to the media. You could face pretty serious repercussions for talking to us.
Yes, correct.
Why did you decide to?
I think it's unfair to victims. I think victims, they need to be heard. You needs to investigate. It doesn't matter if it's a cop or who it is. A victim has rights.
Watching the way in which a lot of these women are questioned, it's hard not to feel like the driving assumption is that they're making it up.
You know, these are great victims. I hate to say it like that, but these are victims that are hard to believe. It's hard to prove sexual assaults. And I think it's even harder when it's an officer and a victim has to come forward and knowing that the department is going to be investigating one of their own.
So I want to play you a clip of an interview of Brian Bailey. When we played interviews from some of the internal investigations, the detective picked up on a few of the things that had also stood out to us. Investigators were treating cops very differently than their accusers, and they weren't challenging suspicious responses by officers.
Anytime.
Exactly.
If you're in the phone conversations or exchange, have you ever asked for any kind of nude pictures of her or anything like that?
Don't believe so, no. Well, right there's a lie. I mean, it's either yes or no. You either know that you sent pictures or you didn't.
And key evidence wasn't immediately being obtained.
I think his phone should have been downloaded immediately. You have enough evidence, you have probable cause to ask for it. I mean, a year later, evidence is lost.
The delay in seizing his phones and other failures by investigators
Exactly.
were also highlighted in the civil suit.
Yes.
When some of the more public allegations of sexual abuse come out, ones against officers like Brett Hankison or Brian Bailey, are people internally surprised? Were they surprised?
No, not at all.
Why not?
Brett Hankison and Brian Bailey are who they are. Brett Hankison used to come to FOP parties, and he would always come with always 3 women, very young women. They were probably 20 and he was in his 40s.
Wow.
Close to 40.
Wow.
He worked with Brian Bailey. He's married. He was always texting other officers, asking them out or just saying inappropriate things.
Multiple current and former officers told us the same things about both Brett Hankison and Brian Bailey. What's the perception of the Public Integrity Unit in the department?
If you know the right people, then you may not even get investigated. But on our department, if you were to say something, and again, you're not in the popular crowd, they will come after you and let the bad egg continue to be the bad egg.
If someone came to you and told you that something had happened to them, and a police officer had done it, what would you tell them to do? Would you tell them to go to the police department?
No. With PIU, I can't say that they would do a thorough investigation against a cop.
We ask hard questions because hard questions get asked of us.
Yeah.
Okay? We're not investigating somebody spray painting the side of somebody's house.
Yeah, but
okay, these are pretty serious
things. That this guy has been looked into because all the young girls in the West End knows him and knows. Oh, no.
Maybe nobody else has came forward until you.
Well, that's probably a smart idea that they did. I wish I would.
In hindsight, I mean, I don't know that it even did me any good to talk to him. I don't really think so.
Allegations of sexual assault and misconduct on the part of police officers aren't unique to LMPD. Phil Stinson is a former cop who spent years building a database of crimes committed by police officers.
So this is just a spreadsheet of all the cases in the system. We have 20,433 cases of an officer being arrested since January of 2005.
2,000,
He categorizes
20,000.
about 10% of those
Ridiculous.
20,000 cases as crimes of sexual violence.
This might just be the tip of the iceberg. It might be that this conduct is even worse than I think it is, more prevalent than I think it is. And I think it's widespread at many agencies across the country.
His research attempts to quantify something that he used to see firsthand.
So when I was a young police officer, there were a few women in the city that I worked in that had a reputation that this is somebody that you can coerce into sexual activity. And it was written off that it was a woman. She's coming on to the officers. It's her that's the problem. And what we know now is that it's just simply not the case, that police officers use the power and control that come with the badge and the gun, the authority of being a police officer, to manipulate and coerce a vulnerable person into sexual acts.
Do these officers have an inflated sense of power, or are they just aware of how much power they have?
Well, they do have a lot of power, and they think they're invincible. They think they're not going to get caught. They've seen other officers engage in these types of activities and get away with it. That's part of the police socialization process. Police chiefs adhere to the bad apples theory. They'll publicly state that we've got a problem officer when it just can't be ignored anymore. The problem is, what my research has identified is it's really a rotten barrel problem. It's the culture of policing.
Did you know you can receive free cell phone service?
Sorry about that. 20,000 incidents with this Louisville Police Department. Now ask yourself how many officers actually lost their jobs. It's very sick information.
I don't think people realize what really goes on out there. And I had a glimpse into what goes on out there. And it's
another
terrifying
woman.
because I feel like everyone is one police interaction away from their life being destroyed.
For Heather Richards, that interaction started on an otherwise unremarkable day. She met LMPD officer Pablo Cano while bike riding in the park. Then, a few nights later, he stopped by her house while on duty.
And then he started to kiss me. It kind of just accelerated from there. I just remember on the sun porch, I could feel like the weight of like the gun, and then there was a spot of Velcro that was rubbing on my hip that like I just focused on because it's easier to focus on something else. I could not believe what was happening. I mean, never in a million years would I think that meeting an on-duty officer on my front steps would end that way. He stood up and pulled his pants up and started to put himself back together, and I just remember he was tucking in his shirt and said, "I can't go back looking like a shit show."
This is crazy. This is
I
crazy.
was on the couch crying, and so, you know, I felt like the nerve of you, that you're worried about tucking in your shirt and looking presentable to go back to work after you raped me.
Richard says that 2 days later, Cano came back to her house and raped her again.
So I thought my worst case scenario is I go to the hospital, get a forensic exam. They ask who raped me. I tell them it's an on-duty cop. He's on right now. They put a call out. He hears the call come through. Him or his buddies show up at the hospital and terrorize me further.
Lord have mercy.
It took her almost a year to work up the courage to go to the police.
That was the first 4+ hours of interview, or as I call it, interrogation.
Why do you call it interrogation?
So you're in this tiny gray cinder block room. I'm scared to death. And you have these two men sort of, you know, and you have to give them these horrible details and graphic details of what happened. And, you know, there I am defending my own words or actions in a moment of extreme trauma. And they're just trying to tear them apart and intimidate me.
Tell me what happened.
I did. I told you for 3 hours the other day. And again today. I mean, I had no intention of inviting him in. I had no intention of having sex with him. He fucking forced himself on me.
Then he doesn't even call you.
I don't fucking care. At that point, I definitely got the sense that
Look at that.
nothing may happen. That this might just go nowhere.
How do I get it?
I don't know. That's why you're paid the big bucks, I guess. I don't know. Do your magic. I don't know. How do you get anyone to confess a crime? What proof do I have except that I lived through it? I mean, if you're
Let me stop right there. Of what has happened pertaining to all of this information. Woo, this story here with Heather is very interesting because he obviously met her in the park. Now, did they engage in conversation at the park while riding bicycles? She's riding her bicycle. Did he say something to her? Hey, how you doing? Hello, what? Or did he follow her home? He was attracted to her. He liked what he saw. He followed her home and then one day decided to stop by her home to say what? What did he say to her when he stopped by? So this is what you have to ask yourself, because naturally these interrogators are going to ask, okay, he saw you at the park, you saw him. Did you two talk? Did engage? What happened at the park, which led him to find you at your house? When he knocked on the door, what did he say? I need to talk to you about an incident at the park. I need to talk to you about an incident across the street. He's in uniform, so naturally you think, okay, it's nothing serious. What did he say when he knocked on the door? Because this incident allegedly took place on a sun porch. So maybe she came out, he knocked on the sun porch door or the main door. But they engaged in conversation on this porch. What did he say to her? Because she said there was no intention to have any relations with him. So then you have to ask that main question. What was the conversation on that day? Why didn't you call somebody such as the state police? Because I do believe Kentucky has state police, or the FBI, the Kentucky field office. If you felt afraid to go to the police department, that you'd be talking to the same people with the same mindset. But then as she says, I'd be talking to the same people who do what he does, and I wouldn't feel comfortable. And naturally, you can hear in this interview, she didn't feel comfortable with the questions they were asking her. And also retaliation. That's a normal thing to feel. is that you would be retaliated against with other officers, get hurt, harm, break in, or worse, hell, kill you. But I'd like to know what was said at that damn door. What reason did he use to engage in conversation? And then to rape her on a sun porch? So now you have to ask yourself, was it covered up? Did it sit at the front of the house or the back of the house or the side of the house? Because I'm wondering if this sun porch can be seen from the street. You have to ask all those questions because you have to figure out how did it get to that point of him raping her and then coming back again. This is crazy as hell. This is absolutely crazy.
I have, except that I lived through it. I mean, if you're telling me it's not enough, then fuck it. Let him go out and rape a bunch of other people and you'll deal with it later.
Richards filed a lawsuit against the city. After her allegations went public, 8 more women came forward to say that Cano had raped them too. 5 of them spoke to LMPD.
He showed up at my house and he showed up in a police car. I thought we were going to have a conversation, but he kind of put me up against the wall and pinned me and kissed me, and he had put his gun down on the table and immediately came over and like grabbed me like around behind my head. And at that point he just grabbed me by the back of my hair and head. But he had the uniform on and he had that vest that has like that, the bulletproof, I guess that's what it is. He had a bulletproof vest on, and I could feel his gun hitting the back of my legs.
Did he have his gun belt on at the
Yes.
time? And he had his uniform shirt on?
Yes.
He never took any of that stuff off?
Crazy.
He can't take his clothes off. He has to hurry up and get home.
Raping a woman with a vest on and gun. This is Cano. The only one that's been charged criminally from this department. Very interesting.
PIU interviewed an officer who worked with Cano. She described concerning behavior that was widely known, but apparently had never been reported.
It was no secret to anybody on the platoon that he was having sex with people he met as a police
This is a female officer speaking.
So it wouldn't be out of the ordinary if he left his beat and went to somebody's house and had sex.
I'm not believing this.
Very harmful.
Go to their house.
Of course, yes, sir. He would talk about just how regular sex wasn't enough and how it had to get
Rough.
dirtier,
Mm-hmm.
how it had to get more physical, riskier.
The officer recounted a story she'd heard about a week before the news of the lawsuit against Cano broke, when a new commanding officer was taking roll call for their platoon.
It was his first night on late watch and says exactly that. Who are my problem children? Every single person at the roll call table turns, points at Cano. He starts laughing and looking down and says, yes, sir, I'm a rapist and a sexual deviant. What can I say?
Wow.
After
Did you hear
interviewing
that?
several more witnesses and accusers, investigators brought Heather Richards back in. Months earlier, they pointed to text messages she sent as potential evidence that she hadn't actually been raped. This time, they turned to her internet search history.
You Googled certain things before your first interview. One of them was, can I rape? You did. I have the reports.
Okay, yeah.
One of them was, can I remain anonymous after a rape?
Oh, right.
You did ask that. The other question that you asked that I'm curious about is, what do I say in a police interview?
What do I say? I don't know that I would word it that way.
Did you Google that to look up answers that you should give about questions that could be asked?
No. I mean, I wouldn't have gone in ever if I wasn't going in to say exactly what happened.
At this point, the investigator was brought a binder where Richard's entire internet search history had been printed out.
Wow.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. What should I do in a police interview?
It sounds way less boundaries.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. But
Right.
my question is, did you Google that to try to
know certain things, key phrases to say in regards to that. Okay. Understand, that's the way they will be portrayed by somebody who's a lot less.
That's super creepy. They were tearing apart with a fine-tooth comb all of the victims' lives. And I'm sure if they had something to leverage against me, they would have.
Investigators repeatedly explained their probing questions by pointing to an eventual cross-examination by a defense attorney. Except Heather Richards never got the chance to testify because Pablo Cano was offered a plea deal.
A former Louisville Metro police officer has been sentenced to 5 years in prison. Pablo Cano pleaded guilty to multiple counts of sexual misconduct.
Cano was accused by 5 women of forcing them to have sex.
The officer was extended a professional courtesy, even as a criminal defendant, where he was able to go to court once and have everything handled. In other words, he could go, be arraigned, enter his plea, and be sentenced all in one court appearance, so as not to humiliate the officer from the aggravation of having to go to court multiple times. That doesn't happen for other criminal defendants.
In 15 minutes, this whole thing plays out. He's charged, he pleads, and he's whisked away. And I was like, where are they taking him? What's happening? We were willing to testify, and we wanted him to do a lot of time.
Instead, the felony rape charges were amended down to 5 counts of sexual misconduct, all misdemeanors. Cano was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with the chance of parole even sooner.
Wow.
Everything's taken away when you're raped. It's taken away when you report, and they took it away in court.
The prosecutor on the case told Vice News that there wasn't enough evidence to prove the more serious sexual assault charges beyond a reasonable doubt. For the past year, the Department of Justice has been investigating potential civil rights abuses at LMPD, including the department's handling of complaints and internal investigations. We reached out to the PIU investigators seen in this piece, and none of them responded. In Bailey's case, the survivors are still waiting for criminal charges. LMPD investigators concluded that his actions did reach the level of crimes, but as they noted in their own report, by the time the criminal investigation was concluded, the statute of limitations had long passed. The Commonwealth Attorney's Office says it's still considering charges. Prosecutors could charge him with forcible sodomy, which is a felony, but that seems unlikely given the department and city's track record.
That's the most frustrating part, is that he basically, as of right now, has gotten away with it.
I'm pretty sure there's always going to be that type of officer out there. I just hope that now maybe if somebody, if they're like a sex worker or on drugs, I still hope that they would be believed rather than ridiculed by internal affairs.
They prey on the vulnerable people who don't have a voice, for so many reasons can't or won't speak up. And if they do report, they're silenced or nothing happens. That's just sending a big message, like, we don't care if you're raped. We don't care what this cop does to you. He can do whatever he wants, and we're not going to do anything about it.
All right, everybody. Vice News is the source for that said information. The one lady speaking, Miss Heather, she seems to appears to be an older lady, possibly, I'd say, mid-50s to early 60s from appearance, not to be disrespectful. When you see Cano, he's a dark-haired young man at the time of the assault. Decent man, nice-looking man to some degree. But we know that looks isn't everything. That looks hide a multitude of sins. What was his attraction to this woman? Because as I said, she appears older in this piece here. This is just a few years old, this assault. So why? Why any woman? But you understand what I'm saying? See, these people out here stalking and picking their victims, watching them. That's obvious what Cano did. He watched. Because this older lady, he met her at a park. And as I said, what was the transaction at the park? Interaction, rather, at the park. to lead to the front door, because he seemed to like to go to people's houses. So that means he had to have watched them somewhere to just show up at their house to assault them. So he's watching random women in the public, then following them home to see where they live, to then show up at the front door to say what exactly. What was the ruse he used when he showed up to these women's homes? It's a very sick situation. And he's the only one that has been prosecuted in this, these officers, Cano. Because there is information in the YouTube queue pertaining to other officers such as Hankison and another one that did not get criminally charged, but Cano did. So one would have to ask themselves, why did he take the plea deal? Because he could be free sooner than the 5 years, and they're saying they didn't have enough information for a serious charge, of a felony charge. So basically they were misdemeanors of what? Sexual groping. But this woman, Miss Heather, says she was raped. She was raped, not just sexually groped. So he got a year for raping a woman, allegedly. What's a year? It's nothing. And my thing is, if you're going to give him 5 years, a 5-year plea deal, hell, you might as well just give him probation. Why not? He took a plea. The charges were broke down to misdemeanors. So why even give him any prison time? And naturally, he wouldn't be welcome in prison due to his sexual charges. And also being a dirty cop. Probably isolated in the prison with other sexual sadists. But nonetheless, he took a plea, and they were for misdemeanors. So my thing is, why did he even take the plea? What is he going to do when he gets out? Because he's not going to be able to work anywhere without what? Being known as a sadist. But they're misdemeanors, so he probably doesn't even have to register as a sexual offender. So I wonder about that as well. Will he have to register? This is bogus. But there's obviously a problem with this Louisville, Kentucky. The police department in itself, different precincts, of course. All officers are not the same. All officers are not dirty, crooked, stealing, robbing dope houses, persons' valuables, raping women, soliciting women for sexual favors, coercing informants to perform acts. But you got a glimpse in this commentary that there's some wickedness going on in these police departments. Thank you all so much for joining me. If you'd like to donate to the channel, $BigAngie129 Cash App. All super chats and stickers are welcome during the live. This is a winded live at 2 hours in. My last commentary is pertaining to a beautiful young lady who was in the military, and she was brutally murdered, dismembered. And I'm going to bring you that said information. It was a bit winded. I really want to do that commentary alone because it's a lot of information, but I'm going to try to be brief. KHOU11 is the source. This was uploaded 6 days ago. Thank you for joining me.
High-profile case sparked new rules about sexual assault in the military. Stephanie Whitfield is live with more on these new developments. Stephanie, good morning to you.
Good morning. It's been more than 2 years since Vanessa Guillén's death, and these new documents reveal she may have been murdered because she saw something she wasn't supposed to. These documents in question come from the Texas Department of Public Safety, and it describes an interview with Cecily Aguilar, who's the only person charged in the murder. She reportedly told authorities her boyfriend, fellow soldier Aaron Robinson, murdered Guillén because Guillén saw a photo of Aguilar on his phone. The document states, quote, he told her he was worried about getting in trouble for violating the Army's fraternization rules since Aguilar was still married to another soldier, and he hit Guillén in the head with a hammer. Investigators say Aguilar later helped Robinson dismember Guillén's body, then bury her 30 miles away from Fort Hood. But Robinson shot and killed himself the day after her remains were found. Now, Aguilar faces 11 charges for her role in Guillén's death, including tampering with documents. Her attorneys have filed motions to throw out her confession and the indictments, but so far, those motions have been denied. Dave, back to you.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's said information coming out of Texas. KHOU11 is the source. This is very baffling information because I have a lot to say about this subject matter because it really doesn't make any sense the allegation that she saw a picture of this Aguilar woman on the phone who was married at the time. And it's a very lengthy article. And I don't want to just chop it up in bits and pieces because it won't make any sense to you to what was alleged by this Aguilar, what was alleged by Mr. Robinson. But I'm going to start off by saying, what was the real relationship between Robinson, the African-American male who killed himself, and this woman, Guillén? Because something is off with this whole story. This woman wants me to believe, Aguilar, that her boyfriend, knowing that she was married now to another officer, which we later find out they all room together. And that's how they all end up getting in cahoots with each other. Why in the world would he kill this other officer because she saw a picture of this woman? First of all, how does she even know who the woman is? What was your phone doing out for her to see the woman? Did she ask you who the woman was? Did you admit, oh yeah, that's a lady I'm seeing. Shh, don't tell anybody. She's a married woman. I'm messing with her. Don't say nothing. The story makes no sense. It's also been alleged that Guillén was sexually harassed while in the Army. But they're saying information about Robinson, he wasn't that guy. This shower incident, that it was another, I believe, superior. What is the truth? She obviously told her mother she was having issues in the Army with being sexually harassed. Why would she make that up? So who was harassing her? Was it Robinson or was it another officer or both? So far, nothing has come to fruition of anyone sexually harassing this woman. And this BS about a picture of Aguilar on the phone, and that's why he killed her, makes no sense to me. Could it be he was interested in her, Vanessa? She rebuffed his advances, and that is when he beat her in the head with the hammer in that armory room. 11 Alive is the source. Documents also reveal authorities found blood in the Army room where Guillén was killed, but not until roughly 2.5 months after she went missing. A document from the Texas Department of Public Safety that was filed in federal court reveals the motive behind why Fort Hood's SPS Vanessa Guillén was murdered in 2020 by fellow soldier Aaron Robinson. The document, filed on May 19th this year, describes an interview with Cicely Aguilar, the only person charged in Guillén's murder. At one point, authorities asked Aguilar why her boyfriend Robinson would want to kill Guillén. She told authorities he did it because Guillén saw a photo of Aguilar on Robinson's phone, the document states. Guillén saw Robinson's cell phone lock screen, which contained a picture of Aguilar, the document states. He told her he was worried about getting in trouble for violating the Army's fraternization rules since Aguilar was still married to another soldier and he hit Guillén in the head with a hammer. Aguilar, who was indicted with 11 counts by a grand jury last July, was dating Robinson despite being married to another soldier, Keon Aguilar. Guillén was killed on April 22, 2020 on post by Robinson, according to an FBI criminal complaint. Robinson, with the help of Aguilar, later dismembered Guillen's body and buried her remains near the Leon River in Bell County, the complaint alleges. Guillen's remains were later found on June 30th, 2020. The next day, Robinson shot and killed himself, which left people wondering why he murdered her if they didn't have any connection to each other. Robinson would go into moods in which he would not be his normal self and have a tic, Aguilar said, according to the document. Authorities later interviewed a Bell County jail inmate who Aguilar spoke to about Guillen's murder, the document states. Per the document, the inmate said Aguilar told her that Robinson snapped, and he had an image in his head. He saw himself kill Guillén and wanted to do it. The Texas DPS document reveals interviews authorities had with Aguilar, Robinson, and others, as well as details aspects about Aguilar's statements. These details can be found below. Aguilar's confession. Prior to revealing the motive behind Guillen's murder, Aguilar spoke to authorities multiple times during the search. According to the document, throughout, she claimed she was at home the night Guillén disappeared and that Robinson was with her, the document states. However, the day Guillen's body was found, Aguilar told authorities a different story according to the document. She explained that she and Robinson had an argument around midnight the night Guillén disappeared, per the document. As a way to cope, Robinson drove her around and stopped multiple places throughout the night before they returned to her apartment at 5 a.m., the document adds. One of her supposed coping mechanisms was to drive around and stargaze, the document states. She claimed she did not want to be looked at differently for having a mental illness issue, therefore did not admit. Oops. Have to reload. Sorry about that. Let me go back. This is a very winded article. It's having problems getting it loaded back up. Okay. Hold on one second. Okay. As I said, her coping mechanism was to be driven around to stargaze allegedly. And she didn't want to admit that she had a mental illness. However, at that point, authorities told her that they could tell she was lying and pointed out the smell in the interview room was that of human remains from when they found Guillen'S body earlier that day, the document states. I asked Aguilar to start the story over and tell the truth this time. She then asked if I would like her. Hold on one second. This thing keeps jumping off. Tell me what happened, is what the detective asked her. Aguilar told authorities Robinson killed the girl. She proceeded to tell authorities how Robinson took her out to the Leon River and showed me her, the document asked. She also claimed she didn't know Robinson was taking her to the Leon River and that he held a gun to her head to help him dispose of Guillen'S body. While there, the document states, authorities said she was lying about that detail per the document. Aguilar further explained she bought 2 bags for $10 after querying concrete for sale on Facebook Marketplace. She got the idea to buy the concrete that way from watching the show CSI Criminal Minds and believed she would not leave a paper trail. During the conversation about the concrete, Aguilar said they used the concrete both nights. I realized this contradicted her claim of not knowing why she was going to the Leon River the first night and asked her to clarify. Aguilar then said they only used the concrete on the second night. I later learned Aguilar bought the concrete the first night prior to even going to the Leon River. Thus, she lied about Robinson forcing her at gunpoint while at the location. Aguilar told authorities she then removed Guillen'S body from the government-owned tote Robinson carried her in because Robinson didn't want to. The document states she told him that how she then dismembered Guillen'S body and burned her remains along with Guillen'S clothes and the government tote per the documents. She told authorities they returned to the location a second night to finish dismembering Guillen'S body as well as burying her bones in the ground and covering it with concrete, the document states. Aguilar and Robinson placed the bones in 3 or 4 holes and thought they would not be discovered for a couple of years, the document states. While Aguilar told authorities the events that happened the night Guillen disappeared, Robinson was under surveillance by authorities on Fort Hood per the documents. While Aguilar was with authorities, she was asked to get Robinson to see if he would talk about the murder by telling him that she was scared and wanted to turn herself in. Robinson eventually began to admit culpability after Aguilar asked, "What are we going to do if we get caught?" Robinson replied, "I don't know." Aguilar then said, "I'm going to tell them the truth. I can't keep doing this," to which he said, "Okay." Robinson went on to say he was in a conference room and he did not want Aguilar to abandon him, the document states. Around 10 p.m. on June 30th, 2020, authorities were notified that Robinson managed to elude authorities and get off post, the document states. While in custody, Aguilar also continued to talk to Robinson as authorities searched for him, the document adds. The two discussed turning themselves in together. Robinson said he would if she would meet with him first, the document states. They also discussed news reports from that day saying the officers had recovered human remains near the Leon River in Belton, to which Robinson said, "Baby, they found pieces. They found pieces." Authorities eventually found Robinson in the area, 5705 East Rancier Avenue in Killeen after midnight, the document states. When officers with the Killeen Police Department approached him, Robinson pulled out a pistol, shot himself in the head. Aguilar went with authorities to the Leon River shortly after Robinson killed himself. She accompanied to locate Guillen'S remains, the document adds. While helping find her remains, authorities asked what Aguilar would like to tell Guillen'S family. She replied that, "I'm sorry. Sorry I didn't speak up. Sorry they lost their daughter too soon," the document states. Robinson was the last person to see Guillen. Per an interview with Robinson, they were both working in the Army room on Fort Hood the day she disappeared, the DPS document states. The document makes no mention of anyone searching the Army room until July 9th, 2020, which is a little over 2 months since Guillen disappeared and days after her body was found. When they did, they found traces of blood in the room Robinson worked in, as well as a toolkit that was missing a hammer, the document states. This launched a secondary search by the Army CID. On July 10th, authorities interviewed Keon Aguilar, the estranged husband of Cicely Aguilar. Keon told authorities that he spoke with his wife regarding Robinson being a suspect in Guillen's disappearance. He also said he talked about her involvement before June 30th, 2020. That was actually the day that he told me that Robinson had took her to bury the body. Hold on 1 minute. buried the body after he had it cut up or something like that, Keon Aguilar told authorities. When asked what day that was, he said he believed his wife told him Robinson dismembered Guillen'S body May 8th, 2020. Keon stated he told one of his supervisors Robinson had killed Guillen and they had cut up her body, the document states. This was after 5/8/2020. But before Keon's discharge from the military, it's unclear when he was discharged. During an interview with Robinson on May 19, 2020, authorities asked him about a firearm he had, according to the document. More particularly, stories the Army CID heard about Robinson having a firearm. When asked, Robinson said he owned a weapon that he used to play hide and seek with Aguilar's husband. The document states he used the cleared weapon to find PFC Aguilar. I don't understand what they're talking about right here. When he found PFC Aguilar's hiding spot, he stated, "Ha, I found you," and point the weapon at him. The document also reveals Robinson had a hit list. Robinson also spoke of a hit list he had, but claimed never to have threatened to kill someone. The document states Robinson further said he did not hate any non-commissioned officers or any other soldiers he worked with. Texas DPS didn't provide any names on the hit list in the document, including whether or not Guillen was on it. Woo, that's a lot of information. 11 Alive. Thank you for joining me. This is a 2-hour, 20-minute live. I did not mean to go this long, but this information about Vanessa is ridiculous to me. I'm just going to say this and try to be brief. I don't understand anything that's been said in this document. First of all, as I said, why would she care about who he was sleeping with unless she heard rumors that he was dating a Caucasian female or whomever the woman is? She appears to be Caucasian in her mugshot. You will see pictures of her and her husband at one time in a car. She looked pretty decent, way different than her mugshot picture. You can see the difference in her hair color, the texture, everything. She just seems more ragged looking at the time of her arrest. So what is the truth behind the death of Vanessa and Mr. Robinson? Why did he murder her? He killed her in his room. They didn't find evidence until 2 months later, which I find very suspect. The fact that he was able to get off a post to go leave, to then be apprehended and kill himself, because obviously that shows he was guilty of killing Vanessa. How did he get away from the unarmed escort? Because it also says he had an escort. So how did he get off base? They also questioning, how did he get in a car? What car did he use? Whose car was it that he got off base when he was supposed to be watched and monitored? The fact that Keon, who's the husband of Aguilar, the girlfriend, she had a husband. They all roomed together at one time. That's how she met this black man, Mr. Robinson. He was their roommate, she and her husband. But she had marital problems. Next thing you know, she's hooking up with Mr. Robinson. And then he moved out, got his own place, and allegedly she moved in with him. Very wicked, a very wicked story. And then you hear this mess of him saying he wanted her to stand by him, I guess, being interrogated by officials about the death of Vanessa. Putting her in a tote. Let's go there. Where did the tote come from? So what happened? How did he kill her in his room on the base? See, none of this makes any sense. You don't get a description of the room, how big it is, what's in the room that can conceal a body, for him to get the body out of there into the tote. So how would he have had a tote to put her in the first place? Because that means you'd have to have the tote inside of the armory room. How did he get her in the tote? Where did the tote come from? Did he kill her, then went and got a tote from where? His car? Off post? Brought the tote back? Took the tote back into the armory, put her in it, took her to the river. Then we hear that they put her in holes after chopping her up, different holes. Just this story is wicked and crazy. And I believe it was a 2-week interval from the time he killed her to the time they went back and cut her up. So she laid out there. And then it went back. He got help with this girlfriend, to help dispose of the body. Then you have to ask what the hell was wrong with her. Why would you help this man dispose of a body? You were this hoodwinked and bamboozled by this black man to cut up a woman's body? And you believe the version he gave? Let's go there too. So you believe the version he gave. Oh, she was on to us. She was going to report me. That I'm having an affair with you. It's against Army policy to be having an affair with another comrade's spouse. So you don't know what to believe. And as you heard in his commentary, they knew that she was lying when she talked about buying the concrete. She makes it appear that she bought the concrete after the fact of being told that he murdered the woman. But then they have information that she bought the concrete beforehand. So did she conspire with Mr. Robinson to kill this woman? What? What does she actually know? What is her actual role besides dismembering an alleged deceased body? And we know she had to be deceased when he put her in a tote, because there's no way she would have survived being put into a tote and then transported to this river, which is some miles away from the base. She would have suffocated in the tote if she was happened to be alive from the injury from the hammer. So you don't know what to believe with this story. And this story is just like so many wicked stories pertaining to Fort Hood. Fort Hood has had too many missing soldiers, murdered soldiers. A lot of craziness has been happening with this Army base the past couple of years. This place needs an internal investigation from the top to the bottom. Middle, sideways, every which way. Because they have stayed in the news the past couple of years with missing soldiers, dead soldiers, soldiers found in a burnt up vehicle. There's something wicked about Killeen, Texas. I don't know if there's something in the damn drinking water out there, but there's something wrong with the civilians. There's something wrong with the people that are in the military. And that's the whole point of the story, is that people are tainted. It doesn't matter if they're police officers, if they're in the military, high rank, no rank, little rank, doesn't matter. People are just not well. And it doesn't matter what position they choose in life, what field of work they go in. They're just people who are not right. And Mr. Robinson was obviously not right. He chose a woman who ended up not being right, because the right thing for her to do was to say, no, I'm not helping you bury anybody. I'm not helping you chop up this woman's body. And she should have went to the authorities and told them that he killed that woman. Now let's talk about Keon, the husband of Aguilar. Why was he discharged from the military? They don't go into detail in this said commentary. I think he got discharged because he went to his superiors to tell them that he found out that the woman, his wife, dismembered Guillen'S body, but he did it a while after the actual death, which was allegedly May 8th, 2020. He didn't go until, a month or so later, telling a superior. And they obviously got information that he knew beforehand. So I believe that's probably why he was discharged from the military. Do you see all these lives that have gotten messed up from one person dealing with another one? And it all started with Mr. Robinson. He's having an affair with another comrade's wife. They move in together. He and Miss Vanessa have some type of issues with one another. He murders her on the base, takes her out in a tote, out in the middle of nowhere, gets his girlfriend, who's married, to help him cut her up. She goes and tells her husband. Why, I do not know. That's another question. Why would you go tell your husband? You're not even with your husband. So you're going to go tell him, oh, hey, by the way, this guy I'm messing with that I met through you, that I'm sleeping with, having an affair with, oh, he killed another lady, another comrade, and he asked me to help cut her up, and I did. And then he takes that information to his superiors, and then he's later discharged, possibly because he didn't tell as soon as he got the information. Are you hearing this information I'm bringing to you? This is wicked in the highest form. One thing begets another, and this is what happens with wrongdoing. One person does something, then they go tell Peter, Paul, Mary. Then Peter, Paul, Mary helps out with the crime during, after the fact, whichsoever. Then they go tell bits and pieces of the story. So you really don't know what to believe with this story. Because in the end, I don't know if I believe that Robinson killed Vanessa because of Aguilar's photo on his phone. Because what you have to ask is the ultimate question. Vanessa didn't have a dog in the race about his personal business. And I'm supposed to sit here and believe that she looked at a photo on his phone. Who's that? He said what? Oh, that's my lover. That's a married woman I'm messing with. Shh, don't tell nobody. So she said what? Oh, I'm going to go tell. I'm going to go do something. This is crazy to me. This is absolutely crazy and baffling to me. Because you see, when people are heinous enough to kill someone, you don't know the version that they gave another person is the truth. Why would I think that he told Aguilar the truth about whatever happened in that armory? I got a feeling he was attracted to her. She was a pretty girl. She was one rank under him in the military, very young. And I think possibly he was attracted to her. I believe he's probably made advances to her. I won't doubt he's one of the people that was making sexual advances toward her, and that he's possibly one of the people she was speaking about to her mother. And I believe on that fateful day in the armory, something got out of control in that room. And who's to say she wasn't sexually assaulted? Now, I've not heard any information that she was sexually assaulted. Any DNA has come back linking Mr. Robinson to penetrating her or skin under nails or anything like that. But I think they should have done a thorough autopsy as far as rape. And I'm not saying they didn't, but I'm saying I haven't heard anything as far as a rape kit performed on the decedent. Because the fact that you now know that she was found dead out there, well, you possibly can't do that. I just thought about that because she was dismembered, excuse me. So you probably couldn't. And then it was months before she was found. So her body wouldn't have been, I guess, in an adequate state to perform an DNA kit. Forgive me for that. I'm sorry about that. That's just the first thing that comes to my mind. But I forgot she was, dismembered. So that would have been not feasible in this case. But I think if she was found whole, that would have been the first thing to do would be an autopsy to see if he had sexually assaulted Miss Vanessa. This is a wicked story. And I believe there's more to this story than a picture on a phone. Because what you have to ask yourself is, why would this woman care about who Mr. Robinson was sleeping with or dating? She would have had to have full knowledge of what was going on between he and Miss Aguilar. And somebody would have had to told her, and she would have had to have gotten a disagreement with Mr. Robinson about it for him to get angry enough to beat her with a hammer. And then later dismember her with the help of Miss Aguilar. There's more to this story. And we're never going to know the truth because the two participants in this crime are no longer alive. Vanessa is deceased and Mr. Robinson shot himself. And I don't think that even if he hadn't shot himself, he would have told the whole truth about what actually happened in that armory. Was he sexually harassing Vanessa Guillén? Was any other superiors or officers sexually harassing or bothering her, bullying her on base, off base? What is going on with that base? All these murders, missing soldiers. There's something very creepy and eerie with Fort Hood. Because a few years ago when I brought this commentary to my channel, there were endless stories at the time of her disappearance and then death. And they were back-to-back stories. That every time I looked up in the queue, there was a story coming out of Killeen, Texas pertaining to Fort Hood. This is sick, vile. Whatever's going on out there. And as you see, people are just tainted. Doesn't matter if they are police officer, deputy, sheriff, FBI, Army. Doesn't matter rank, doesn't matter position, garbage man, baker. People are people. And I think you all know this if you're woke, that you have no guarantees when you're dealing with a two-legged creature. These machines are vile and they are wicked. And they have no problem with snuffing you out and seeking others to help them with a crime during, before, and after. And this woman is crazy to me because she can't make me understand in her right mind why she helped him dismember another female. You already know what you're doing is wrong by having an affair with another man and you're married. And then you're going to go help him dismember this woman's body because he didn't want to get caught, obviously. And then when they found remains of her, he comes to you. Oh, it's on the news. It's on the news. They found pieces of her. They found pieces. Come again. Yeah, because it wasn't meant for her to be, 1, murdered, 2, discarded out like trash, and 3, cut up. God made sure that she would be found. Amen. Because just imagine had they not found her remains. She would still be missing. Neither one of them would have talked or told anybody, perhaps. But we now know that Aguilar was the weakest link, because she did tell her husband, which I'm curious to why she did that. Maybe she got scared. Did he threaten her? And that's why she went ahead and dismembered the body? Because you got to remember, he never had to really involve her. He could have just went on, dismembered the girl on his own, and never told anybody, and kept her out of this nasty business of involving her. And even then, when he asked her, she could have said, no, I will not help you dismember this woman. Or is it something had been going on with all 3? Something. But we know she couldn't have been in the room when he killed her. So we can scratch her from the initial murder, because she would have had no reason to be on post or in that armory, Miss Aguilar. But her role was devious nonetheless after the fact of the murder, because he went to her to ask her to help dismember Miss Vanessa's body. And I can't understand why any female or man would ever go along with helping to kill a person, facilitation, ordering a hit, helping with a hit, finding people to do the hit, burying a body, discarding a body, and or dismembering a body. You can't tell me you have that much love for another human being that you would help them in any form or fashion to take a person's life and or aid after the fact to discard a person's body. And then abuse of a corpse by cutting up this child's body. What in the hell is wrong with you? And then you have the nerve to say you're sorry to her family. You wish you had spoke up earlier. Yeah, you should have spoke up. You should have went straight to the police department and told what Mr. Robinson did to her in that armory, and that he discarded her out there by the river. And then you should have told him you'll need protection because you don't know what he may do to you. And obviously, he didn't harm her. He didn't harm her. Even after she went and told her damn husband. Because she told him that she told her husband. And he just said, okay. But what I find interesting is that he wanted her to meet him after she had disclosed the information to her husband. So could it be Mr. Robinson was going to do what old folks used to say when I was a young girl? My mama used to say, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. All right. This wench that went and told on me, I got to knock her off too. But then that would be stupid, because had he killed Aguilar, she went missing, then the husband would be double backing to the authorities and say, hey, my wife is missing, and I think Robinson killed her too. Now that would sure enough been interesting. Why did he kill himself? He took the coward's way out. You cowardly killed that beautiful girl in that armory. She worked alongside you. You were 1 rank above her. And I don't know what happened between you two, what relationship you had, but you had no right to kill that young lady. Why did you do it? Why did you kill yourself afterwards? You were willing to let the truth come out that you had murdered her. So why didn't you just come forward, tell what happened, and take your punishment like a man? But that's the whole point. You were never a man. You were sick and ill. And there's no telling what you did to that girl and what was actually going on that damn base. And I got a feeling he was one of those that was sexually harassing her or bothering her. She just couldn't tell anybody. She was afraid to give a name. I wish she had given a name and filed a complaint, but we know the ramifications for going forward with sexual complaints against a comrade. It would have been hard for her to continue to be on that base. And he possibly would have done just what he did to her in that armory. He would have either killed her in the armory or killed her off the base for filing a sexual complaint against him. This is a wicked story out of Killeen, Texas. Prayers to the Guillen'S family. Prayers to the other soldiers on the base for their safety and also for their mental state, for those who obviously are not well, mentally well. There's obviously something wrong with some of these officers on these bases and people in general. The world is sick. You don't know people. And I tell you all that all the time on this network, since you don't know anybody. And that is the reason why we have these podcasts and true crime networks bringing forward information about basic civilians. Eventually they become dirty machines and they have no problem with snuffing you out. And it could be somebody you know of, somebody that's been watching you, co-worker, family member, spouse, ex-lover, friend, foe. You can't trust people. And sadly, women are just easy targets for sexual assault and murder. And also our children. If you see something, say something. Be a part of the solution, not the problem. Mind the little ones. Prayers for our women soldiers. Prayers for our women in general. I'm going to get in because it is late out here. And as you see, dark. I want to thank you all for joining me. If you'd like to donate to this network, $BigAngie129, Cash App. Thank you for following the content, subscribing, like, share, and subscribe. Pass the content along on other social media platforms. Thank you so very much for watching. Thank you for the mods on deck. God bless all of you. Stay safe. Hope you all had a wonderful Memorial Day. As I said, if you see a vet, give him or her a hug. Thank them for their service. And prayers and thoughts with our fallen and those who are currently serving in our military here, stateside and abroad. God bless all of you. As I said, I'm taking this network to a different level of being out into the world, meeting and greeting people and getting their stories to bring to you all. So pray for me in the journey in bringing you stimulating conversation and content. And hopefully we'll get some new people who want to share their stories and their opinions about the world and breaking news. You all have a safe week. God bless all of you. This is Everyday Shenanigans. Good night.